Grandma's computer.
Yeah. So we'll see if you're all business again.
I doubt it.
Oh, was that Dr. Evil laugh?
2 more days we could fucking drink again.
I know. I was starting to have my little questions about you. Thought you might be sipping back on.
Question away. Maybe it's for medicinal purposes. I did have that 2 day.
Oh, that's what it is. Well,
you got to read Howard's memoirs, by the way. Speaking of medicinal purposes,
is that in a hard copy book or is it just on the?
I just
Kindle
got it on
thing?
the internet.
But can I buy a book? Because I need a book.
Let me check and see. I think you might be able
to.
I
can check. I can check myself. Yeah. Just tell me the title of it. It's just called fucking what? Memoirs?
I just. Yeah.
How about that guy? How about those people shitting on Howard in that freaking thing today?
I gotta go back and read that again. But I'm like, this is fucking typical. Worst performance by a Corps commander, and the fucking
how can
Howard.
In all seriousness though, how can anybody? Oh, John, so many people commented on last week's Facebook Live. I think it's this one.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't get the smartest people.
Careful, this is being.
I know, but
Jesus. And all of a sudden we get 5 people showing up. Okay, we're gonna go live.
Oh,
now.
Hey, just 2. Hey, Mary.
Hey. Yeah, I don't understand the whole.
But you know what though? What I don't get about it, and I seriously don't get, is how they could say the worst though, right?
Mm-hmm. I know, right? Like
stupid.
You know
what hold on, I'm actually this thing down. I don't know. It doesn't make it, but it was funny. I read that last night, and I was like, "Oh, Mary's gonna be all over this tomorrow."
Well, yeah.
I think Slocum's the worst, but you know who else isn't that great is Sykes though.
Yeah, Sykes.
What the hell? He didn't fucking do anything.
The knee-jerk reaction to that question is 2 people.
It's Sickles and Howard,
It's
right?
Like, would you fuck off? Like they both did great.
Yeah.
Like. I mean,
there's a lot of fuck off in this world right now, I tell you. But that didn't make any sense. I saw that last night. I'm like, oh, freaking Fincher's gonna lose her shit on this one.
Oh yeah, I saw it before I went to bed, and I'm like, I didn't respond, and then I saw your response this morning, and when that guy was like, you said to that guy, I would like to know your reasoning or whatever, and I respond, I would like.
Oh fuck,
to know
are we
too.
live? Yes, are we on?
Yes, we are.
Oh, I think usually give me some kind of warning.
I said we're recording this now, and now we're going live.
Well, in that case, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Silver Breakfast Club Live. Yeah, way to tip me off on that one. Morning, everybody. What's going on, man?
Good morning.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Snyder. Hey, Gabe. Jacob.
Yeah, who's
Everybody else?
here?
Biddles.
Hey, Allie.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Good morning from a certain West Texas.
Hey, John.
town.
Hey, it's Heckman on here. He's like, #psych them out.
Oh, what's up, John? So we were talking before Mary told me we were live, before she was very rudely told me we were live. We were talking on one of the serious Facebook sites. There is a conversation about who is the worst general at Gettysburg, and everyone's taking a hard beer piss all over Oliver Otis Howard. And so we were talking about that in versus Sickles. We were talking about that a little bit. And so I would say Slocum. That was my answer, but I saw that and that they put out the bat signal towards Canada on that one, and I knew you. And of course, you chimed right in.
Well, I waited for you because I was like, I am not commenting on this right now because I don't need to get riled up before I go to bed or whatever. And then this morning I saw you had commented, and I'm like, oh, let's do this.
Well, I commented, but I saw you. We were going to be like, Triple H and China jumping in that one. It'd be cool if you knew who those people were, Mary.
Triple H, yeah.
China.
Yeah, I know who
it's
both
old
of them
school.
Are. Yeah,
who are they?
They're wrestlers. China passed away a few years ago, and Triple H. I think he's married to Stephanie McMahon.
Wow. See, Jacob's going to have a full rail splitter in his pants when he hears his wrestling talk. But that's what it is. Hey, what's up, Frail? What's going on, man? Yeah, but basically, yeah. So anyway, so that was that whole thing. So
yeah, but it's typical, and I'm gonna go and read the responses after, and I'm gonna try and craft something that is like.
Good, because you crafting something always ends up well.
Somebody, I think it was Snyder, commented that we'd had 4. Like I said, fuck 4 times in the first 4 minutes. He's like, it's going to be a good live. I'm not even drinking.
Oh, you're like Pacino and Scarface on this thing. The funny part about it is, in real life, you don't swear that much as you do here. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about that live button that turns you into a potty mouth. But in real life, you're not as bad as you are. Whatever. Anyway, good morning, everybody. What's happening? Yeah, China, she did die. I think it was Ric Flair's birthday the other day. I saw someone mention too.
Yeah,
speaking of wrestling, when I back in the day, Mary, I used to go to all the wrestling. We used to go to Providence, back at the old Dunkin' Donuts Center. We used to go to Raw and Live. I went to WrestleMania at Boston Garden one time. That was pretty cool. I think it was Boston Garden. It was somewhere. I'm pretty sure it was Boston Garden.
I had friends who were into wrestling, and I admittedly didn't watch it, but they would have it on over at their places or whatever, and I learned who everybody was, like Triple H.
You know what though? It's
China.
It's fun. I mean, it's wrestling. It is what it is. It's not as serious as Boston College hockey or Patriots football by any means, but it's a lot of fun though. It's just fun. I haven't watched it in years, but I remember Triple H back in the day and Ultimate Warrior and all them. Anyway, so good morning to you. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Everybody jumping on. Everybody's up and at 'em already. Wow.
Yeah.
And so hopefully I hate you, Darren. Then again,
Allie B, I am about to write an essay.
Then again, what the voicemail? Oh yeah, exactly. That's okay. Everybody hates Darren.
Well, then of course I get up this morning and I got Howard on my mind from that post, and I'm like, I'm gonna sit down and read his memoirs.
You got a problem when you wake up in the morning, you've got Howard on your mind. It's okay. It's okay.
Whatever.
Hey Jacob, I remember seeing people like Test and who else was all those people? The Wonder Boys and those all that whole era. That was The Rock. That was fun. Back in the this stuff like 2000 around 2001 and 1999. That's what I was kind of into. My friend Joe was really, really into wrestling. He does sports radio here in Boston, and he's hardcore. He knows all this shit.
I had a friend who went to like some wrestling, like whatever. I don't think it was WrestleMania, but some wrestling event in Toronto, and they brought me back a Rock T-shirt.
I saw The Rock play football for the University of Miami at Boston College one year.
Wow, nice.
Dwayne Johnson, remember him? Yeah.
Very cool.
Anyway, so that's good. So we can put away the wrestling talk, I guess. We can put away our spandex for a little while. Anyway.
Elsie's on here. He said #Team 11th Corps.
Yeah, the 11th Corps. But that was we were talking before you. I guess we were on live and realized we were. But people talking about ripping on him for that. And I never understood that. I mean, I know we're not doing the Gettysburg thing today, but we always seem to get back to it.
Yeah.
I don't understand why people focus on him at Gettysburg as some big failure. I never got it.
Because I think it's because he's easy to, and he doesn't really Howard's not one to, he didn't really stand up for himself, I think in some ways, but I saw the two answers were the typical Sickles and Howard. And a few people saying Slocum, which I would agree with, or even like Sykes.
Yeah.
As well. But yeah, the Howard thing is, I think it's because it's so soon after Chancellorsville. And also people are just like,
if you want to talk
Howard.
about Gettysburg failures, okay. For one, it's Slocum first. I'm going to go Sykes second. You know what else I'm going to put up in the fail list, Mary? You're not going to like this, is Reynolds. You know why? Because he put himself out there at the front and got killed right at the beginning. We never should have been there.
Mm-hmm.
He was in charge of the battlefield, and he was right up there with the regiments, and he shouldn't have been. But that's.
I mean, I do I go back and forth about that. Like, it's like, okay, he put himself out there, and he ends up, that's pretty much what happens to Albert Sidney Johnson at Shiloh, right? Yeah. Like, he puts himself out there too. It's a risk, but at the same time, is he out there trying to rally his men? Like, Reynolds was one of these, that's the thing too, like a soldier.
There's that story where Howard, he tells that flag man to put the flag down by the wall, and pretty much where, if you guys, everybody knows Gettysburg, but you're at East Cemetery Hill, and there's that wall, and there's that parking lot where the buses are, where the big water tower is. That extended one more to right at the end of where the hotel is, the 1863, and that was all grass, and there was another fence, right? He told the flagman to take the flag, put it to that second wall. Howard did, and the guy tells Howard, "No way." Howard goes, "I'll do it with you then." And they did it together. And I can't think of too many Corps commanders who would have taken that personal leadership at that point.
Like, fuck that, we're doing this.
And but that's whatever. Who cares? Anyway, so that's the way that is. So anyway, I hope everybody's having a good morning. We had a good podcast, I think. Mary unleashed her new audio equipment, which is very, very exciting.
did.
She recklessly exposed our new audio equipment.
Yeah, and it worked out quite well.
Yeah.
I've become a little bit of
definitely
a, I guess, sound editing geek in the last 6 months, which is great. I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
There's a few comments here. So Mark said because Chancellorsville was so close in the rear view with, I think that's why with Howard and Sickles is Chancellorsville. So they're being followed by those ghosts from the mistake. Like
Well, we
supposed
talked
mistake.
we talked before about, how Lee is the one who really fucked that up anyway when he
Yeah,
fought
that's what
offensively.
Heckman said that Lee failed at Gettysburg, which
Well, he did though, right? And if Hooker was still in charge, Hooker would have failed at Gettysburg. I'll take that to my grave. He would have been aggressive and he would have got his ass kicked.
Yeah, and they didn't need that much of an aggressive general. Ryan said, and nobody who fought under Howard were in a hurry to stand up for him either. That's true. Like nobody was like, I mean, you look at Von Gilsa's after action report for Chancellorsville, he totally throws shade at Howard and throws him under the bus, like completely.
Yeah, Allie, we unleashed our new theme song on the podcast this week too.
Did.
God, that was fun doing that. So
yeah.
Anyway, I didn't realize you could play the violin that well, Mary. That was pretty good. You're a woman of many talents. You're
not me. Good morning, David.
Yeah, good to see everybody jumping on. And yeah, Yingling, that was that. I'm glad you're reading that book though. That Retreat from Gettysburg by Kent is real. I think I said that on Facebook or Twitter, one of them this morning, but it was that's my favorite Gettysburg book out of Catton, out of Fonz, out of Sears, out of Gelso. That one's my favorite because no one talks about the retreat, and there is so much in it. There's so much good stuff in that retreat.
I can't wait to read it. I'm waiting till closer to when we're actually going to do it because I need to finish Black Iron Mercy and then start the.
It'll take you a while. I mean, it's hard reading and there's a lot of details. It talks a lot about guys like Imboden, who people don't realize had the impact he made on the Confederate side with that retreat. It talked about, the getting the wounded out of there versus the military material out of there, and Monterey Pass and Williamsport and Falling River and William Winchester and Staunton. And it's just a fascinating book. But I'm glad we're doing that as part of that book club. But people should read that one anyway, because that's
the thing with whole doing the book club, right? And speaking of book enabling, Jim said he said, thanks for the book enabling of Robert E. Lee and me. I'm 100 pages in and about every 10 pages, my jaw hits the floor. It makes me wonder what I learned in Iowa history, not necessarily about the Civil War, but about the Native Americans. I have a feeling that the Civil War will be a more correct version than Ties.
No, yeah. But no, it's good though. But I mean, what I think when we get into the summertime, when we talk on podcasts the summertime, we'll probably do one specific. I think our Gettysburg one's probably going to be on the retreat. I think we kind of hinted at that.
Well, I think retreat.
No one needs to about Pickett's charge. No,
I don't want to. I don't want to do the mainstream. Like I want to look at say Tilden. People
should focus on Imboden, and they should.
Yeah, that's what Ryan's saying. He had a first-class performance.
I can't see these comments. Although I don't know. I can see some of them, but I can't see all the ones you do.
I'm on my iPad for it.
Yeah, that's okay. But it's an interesting aspect of it all. And you talk about it. It talks about how guys like Judson Kilpatrick, how good they actually were. Yeah. But they get, because of the whole Elon Farnsworth thing, he gets a bad rep of the whole Kill Cavalry thing. But he represents himself very, very well during the retreat. Yeah. And like I think I said to somebody this morning is you can't read that book and still have that why didn't meet attack mentality, right? Yeah. Because everybody, I'm sure everyone who's on this, hey James, the Boston guy, who watches this, they know the terrain, right? You knew that Lee could have taken gun to South Mountain and he could have built that up as a friggin' Gibraltar. Yep. And me would have walked right into it, which is probably what he should have done anyway. And me knew that, and he didn't know what Lee was up to. Was he retreating, or was he redeploying? He did the right thing. He did. The only thing I'll get meat on though, when he was at Williamsport, right, was he should have hit him because he told Lincoln he was going to hit him the next day, and he didn't do it. That was the one. Yeah. Then by that point, I think Lincoln was still putting a little bit of pressure on him, and Lincoln had written that letter that he thankfully never sent, where he basically know where the shoe factory was. You know what's so funny about that, right? Is the whole battle, the Ken Burns thing of the whole battle of shoes. What was funny about that though was the phrase "get the shoes." Yeah. Back in the 1900s was kind of the equivalent of today's phrase "kick their ass." Mm-hmm. So when they talk about let's go ahead and get the shoes, that meant go there and kick their asses. and that kind of got misinterpreted over the years. So it's more that was more of a bravado thing versus shoes. Like it was you beat up the regiment and steal their shoes. So let's get them shoes, turn them battle cry.
I mean,
And
let's face it, they were after Legos, right?
That was the big no one gets that. But that was the big misconception, though, was they say it was a battle over shoes. Let's go kick their asses. So if there was a fight today, 200 years ago, people are going to think there must be an ass factory because they're saying go get that ass, right?
That's what Howard said when he saw the land. He's like, "That's a fine ass."
Earl Van Dorn, right? EVD.
EVD. Like I said in the podcast, that sounds like something you pick up at the Bang Barn.
Oh, I got that damn EVD. I've got a symbol for that. I got it at Holly Springs. What the hell?
Can we say if you've got EVD, you've probably been shot because you gave out an order?
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, we're gonna talk about old Van Dorn next week. We're gonna talk about P Ridge actually.
Yep.
We'll have some fun with that one. That'll be a good time. So,
yep.
Only you weeks. What do I do anyway? So Meridian, right? I guess we're 20 minutes in. We can talk about the whole point of the whole podcast, right? I thought that was a good one. And I think it's one that's a lot of the ass factory. That's what it was, though.
The ass factory. The Lego
Battle of Gettysburg 2022 was a battle over the ass factory. That's what Ken Burns the third's going to say on his almost historically accurate podcast. And he goes, but Meridian is a good study though, because it really, it really basically helped set up that precursor for the March to the Sea, which is really, really neat. There's a lot of colorful characters in this one too.
Right? And you realize too just how much Meridian is for that template, like just as you said for the March to the Sea, but also to look at this is where Sherman did his quote unquote, I guess you could call it research, is this, and I don't want to say justifiable, but is this something that I can do in warfare? And he finds that reference where the monarchs in England are, taking over land in Ireland. And like, that's how he's like, hey, I found my justification. I don't need to do Napoleonic style tactics. I don't need to read Jomini. I need to do this new thing. And it shows the evolution of warfare. And as O'Connell says, it's Sherman's experiment.
Well, I think, Sherman, I picture him like bouncing off the walls. Like, you have a really shaky performance at Chattanooga on Missionary Ridge.
Because as you pointed out something really good when we were talking after the podcast.
Ooh, I'm listening.
You just enjoy that, okay? Just because probably in an hour I'll be chewing you out for something. Fucker.
I'm just going to sit here.
And
bestow, please bestow. Don't ever do that again. Okay. Go ahead.
We're not worthy. You said that he never mentions anything about Missionary Ridge. It's Vicksburg to Meridian. And it's like Missionary Ridge is not even spoken about.
He doesn't, right? Exactly. And we talked before. I know he got pantsed by your boy there, Claiborne, and he had a time. But there was a lot of stuff in his personal life going on at that time. We talked about with his son and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think he mailed that one in. But I think my point was this was his opportunity in his mind. I think that he's sitting there just stewing on this because he knew he screwed that up, right?
He did. Yeah.
He's basically sitting at the past, knowing what's going on, and says, it's not campaign season. There's not a lot going on. What can I do? He's in charge of ironically repairing railroads, which is hilarious irony if you think about it. And he has this idea. He's like, well, the Rebs are still strong in Mississippi. Why don't I get a group together and see if I can go mess stuff up and just go to Meridian, take out that supply area to Selma and Mobile, faint towards Mobile, freak them all out. And I think it was more along the lines of giving himself something to do. I don't know per se if he had that long view where I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do Georgia. I think the Georgia idea probably came along the way. Like I could probably do this again if I could do it this way. Yeah. And who knows, maybe that was the big plan, but I think he probably got into it. And he had the two-pronged thing where he was going to go take Meridian, wipe out their infrastructure, all three of those railroads coming into town, take them out. But then he wanted to take out Nathan Bedford Forrest, right?
That was the big thing for him, I think, that, that was a personal thing again too. Sherman had this thing with making things personal at times. I think the lines were a little bit blurred
Right.
with him for Forrest and Claiborne were where they blurred for him. That
Yeah. Well, you know what though? I think Forrest was, as much as he was in Leonidas Polk's head, Forrest was in Sherman's head.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there was no question.
I don't think it was a matter of Soy Smith not being like talented as a cavalry guy. I think anybody would have balked at that, because you have to, as much as there's, you look forward to the March to the Sea, there's all these rumors going on about what a devil Sherman is. At the same time as Sherman's about to do Meridian, there's the same rumors going on about Nathan Bedford Forrest. Rumors about how he is with his like, and Sherman calls them peculiar force. And there, speaking of bastardizing the English language, I just butchered the word peculiar. There, I finally.
Well, you know what's funny though was, and we're going to talk more about this next week with P. Ridge. Don't you think Albert Pike's Cherokee Brigade with the scalpings and is a lot worse than Forrest? It's just funny how the mentality, I guess, is, and we'll talk more about that whole thing next week when we get into P. Ridge. But not people still stuck on the ass factory, huh? It's amazing how things just. I guess.
Well, the Civil War strip club is going to be called Undulations.
We're going to talk about that. Undulations will be application process will be announced on the internet soon for that one, Mary. We'll see how that is.
Ryan said, on Van Dorn, I'm looking at the 5th Cavalry pre-war. Good God, Albert Sidney Johnson, Lee, Thomas, Van Dorn, Hardy, Hood, Stoneman, and many others. And that's just the alumni for the last 4 years before the war. Another thing about Van Dorn is he's wounded 5 times between Mexico and the frontier wars against the Indians.
Say what you will about Van Dorn, right? But he fought, right?
Oh yeah.
Fill up my tea mug with water because we're still doing dry February. That's a great call on your part, by the way.
I like how you put that on me.
Yeah, I'm gonna totally blame you under the bus for that one, right? Under the damn bus. But but seriously though, he was aggressive. He was a fighter. He certainly was. But it's interesting though. But he was clearly Bedford Forrest. I mean, he was clearly in Sherman's head.
Yeah.
Same way I mentioned before how Polk Sherman was in his head.
Well, when you think about how, sorry, go ahead.
I have the floor. Wow. No, I think it was, we talked, I think after we finished recording the other night, after you finish your violin and extra, you did
not play the violin. I wish I played the violin.
Pour ice cream, you play the violin, you do it all. You really
do. Yeah.
But we talked before about how angry Sherman was at William Suey Smith for not taking out Forrest, right? And I still, we talked about this afterwards, and we didn't mention it in the podcast, but I wonder if the whole point of William Smith going at Forrest was just a speed bump for Sherman to keep Forrest away from Sherman, right? Because it made sense. But this, he had Frank Armstrong of all friggin' people, right? That's what he had bothering him on his march to Meridian when he could have had Forrest too. I don't know if he ever thought that Smith would ever take out Forrest in his mind. And this is just speculation. Yeah. That he was hopefully send Smith through there just to occupy him, to keep him away from him. And if he did, great. But if he didn't, but again, he talked after the war about how miserable he was with Smith and how much he hated him. So he must have thought he could, but that was a nice benefit. You can say what you will about William Suey Smith, but he kept Forrest away from Sherman.
He did, and I think that might have been part of it. Was just this kind of I was thinking about that last night when I was editing, and as well this morning when we were listening. Like, was this more of a diversionary thing on Sherman's part? But then, if it was, it's pretty unfair to throw Smith under the bus like he does in his memoirs and never forgive him. Mm-hmm. To say like you put him in that position probably knowing he was going to fail. But then at the same time, you look at how Sherman speaks of Forrest. He actually says, I don't care how many men get killed, and if it bankrupts the treasury, I want that man dead. Like he didn't
know those Missouri militias were going to jump in and tag team.
Well, yeah, that's hilarious.
Like they were third man in,
like over 11 miles, right?
He gets his ass kicked over an 11-mile spread, right? all I can think about is that like this blazing saddles, that scene of the bar fight at the end where it's kind of spilling from scene to scene to scene. That's how I can see
That's how
it.
you said the Battle of Chickamauga was it was like a
Similar,
bar fight that just like goes room to room to room. This is on a smaller scale.
That's kind of how it was. But no one really knows for sure. At the end of the day, though, Sherman was pissed because Smith got beat and he didn't do his job. But I mean, yes, Forrest was a bane of their existence, and he would come up with Fort Pillow, what happened, down the road, and everything that was going to happen with him. But I wonder if that was part of it. But who knows? I mean, you can never tell.
Yeah. There's some comments here. Howard asks, what if the Confederates rolled at Gettysburg? Where would they target and go next? And then Bo, hey Bo, thanks for watching. Bo said, wait, dry February? Looks at hot toddy. Yeah, just for February though, believe me.
I had a hot toddy one time, Bo, at a Patriot tailgate, okay? And it was like January, and I wanted to like rip off every ounce of clothing I had because I was like sweating out. I mean, seriously, I almost had a coming out party right in the parking lot, Mary. It was those hot. Have you had a hot toddy before?
No, I haven't.
Whiskey and boiling water. Oof. That's what you're drinking, Bo? Seriously? Wow. Okay. Well,
my grandpa used to have those in the mornings. It was his favorite thing was a hot toddy.
Oh, my grandfather used to drink Rob Roy's in the morning. That's why he lived to be 65.
And Ryan said, I learned how badly wounded Meade was at Glendale, shot 3 times, including a nicked lung and liver. I wonder if Meade was grumpy before that or if post-wounding pain makes him the snapping turtle. I think he was born that way.
And like Lady Gaga.
Yeah. But what about that? Like, what if the Confederates had rolled at Gettysburg? Where would they target and go next?
If they won at Gettysburg, they
rolled. Yeah.
I mean, rolled.
I think one.
Oh, one.
They would have getting that right.
No, the whole point of the Gettysburg campaign was a big shopping trip. If they didn't want to Gettysburg, they would have just stayed there. They would have hung out. They would have filled up their coffers. People don't realize when they left Gettysburg, okay, they had 57 miles worth of wagons following them. That you read the Retreat, you'll learn that, Mary. First of stuff they wanted to support. They wanted to get the war out of Virginia, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to refeed the army. Mm-hmm. And is Gettysburg, the battle was a failure as far as a battle goes. The campaign was not a failure. Yeah. They were able to feed that army for the rest of 63, where they probably couldn't have. So yeah. I think if they don't want Gettysburg, they would have stayed there. They would have forced the Union to come push them out, but they would have kept filling up. They would have kept foraging, mm-hmm. and they would have had more than 57 miles. That's what they would have done. That's my opinion.
The other thing that you brought up too, that was a good point in the podcast to do with Lee is just cool. Look at me.
What did I do to deserve these praise from you today? Usually,
I don't know. Okay. I don't know. It's probably the not drinking.
Pay for that.
You mentioned that Lee at Appomattox, he's kind of like in his death, like they're in their death throes at that point. But the reason for that, and I think this is a really great connection, is that he doesn't have any supplies, or he's running low on supplies. His men are starving. That's specifically to do with this, what Sherman and I think what Sheridan are doing with this.
Yeah, so somebody was somewhere. I don't know if it was this or I forget. I dreamt it. Who the hell knows? But somebody was kind of pushing back on us about Donelson last week, basically saying that the goal was to destroy that army and not the Mississippi. I forget how I'm blanking on a little bit, but people don't realize that the point was destroying that infrastructure, so they could not deliver. What was the point? What was the point of making all the gunpowder you could if you couldn't deliver it, right?
Yeah.
And so when you take out Nashville, for example, which was a big gunpowder area at the time, you control that. That's great. But if you didn't take Nashville, if you could destroy the railroads around it, you couldn't deliver it.
Yeah.
It's just as good. So if you take out the locomotives, you're taking out the steam engines, you're controlling the ocean. Yeah. Make all the gunpowder and bullets you want. You can't get it anywhere. What's the point? As long as you don't attack the friggin' armory, we're good.
Exactly. That's probably why Sherman doesn't go after the ironworks or whatever it was in Augusta, because he's like, I'm fucking up their railway system so they can make all the shit they want. They're not going to be able to get it to, they're not going to be able to get it to Lee, and they're not going to be able to get it down to Beauregard and Hardee.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Someone said they should. Yes, that's what it was. I'm going to point them. But
don't point.
Just don't. Anyway, be the next fucking theme song. But you know what? Is if they took Augusta, it would have defeated their overall purpose of that speed of getting through. So if they could have, if they destroy the railroad in the area around Augusta, why waste their time and effort destroying Augusta when they can build and they can't deliver it? Now that's what it was. That's what someone was pushing back on us about.
It was Augusta. But I think it's because like they wouldn't be able to deliver stuff anyway. The other thing I thought of too was with what happened to Soy Smith with going after Forrest. Was that a reason that Sherman did not send a regiment or brigade or whatever to Andersonville because he was afraid of them getting fucked up by Forrest?
No, I don't think so. Because he did send a brigade towards Andersonville. I think not a brigade. He sent basically a scouting force. I think the whole point was he just didn't want to take them. He couldn't take them with him, right? He would have to leave a regiment back to take them out of there. Yeah. You can't certainly take them with you.
No,
you can't feed them.
No, I mean, he's having enough issues with the escaped slaves being with him and trying to feed them, right? So he doesn't need the prisoners and stuff. I mean, it was I think kind of a bad move on Sherman's part, but it might have been one of those like, I have no choice. What's the lesser of two evils here? I have to leave them, you know. There's some good Mark said about Gettysburg, but I really do think Harrisburg would have been a pretty enticing, like he means for Lee. The whole Susquehanna Valley, all the way up to the coal region. Jackson wanted Lee to set fire to the coal mines.
I think he would have stayed in that area. I think he would have stayed there because it was a breadbasket. He would have loaded up. But these stories about how he would have gone to Philadelphia, that way Pittsburgh, that was never going to happen. Because the supply lines are too thick. He wasn't good. Talk about a march to the sea, going from Virginia all the way to friggin' Pittsburgh. I mean, Philly. I mean, Philly. Sorry, Yale, but I'm going to Philly now. You know. Andrew
said that Margie Bears contends that Willie Sherman's death might have played a major part in the Meridian burnout. Sherman returns from Tennessee and is looking to challenge Confederate authorities in Mississippi and annihilate the logistical infrastructure for good. Not sure if this was debated, joined after this started. No, we hadn't even talked about how that his son's death might have played a major part in the Meridian.
Well, we talked about that with Missionary Ridge, though, right?
How it affected him negatively, but then maybe he's starting to take some anger out from that on Meridian.
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
Because he brought his family there and his kid ends up getting sick, which is tragic, you know.
It's tough, but no, who knows how that would have happened. But I think if they'd have pushed, what I'm curious about is if Meade had fallen back to the Pipe Creek line, speaking of Gettysburg, right, and he would have stayed there, would Lee have attacked him? Or would he have stayed where he was and continued to forage and force Meade to attack? That's the thing I'd like to know. Because I'm not sure Lee would have gone at him like that. I think he would have waited.
Yeah.
But then again, Lee was going through all kinds of shit then too. So he might have gone right at him. But
Lee physically is not well during that campaign. He's having to deal with the loss of Jackson and all this other stuff. I mean, I personally think Pipe Creek was a good plan on Meade's part.
He would have. I think what he would have done, I think he would have waited till Stuart got back. He would have found out the situation, but I don't think he would attack that. Yeah, actually, Ellie, I like Philly. Philly's a cool little city. You know,
I've never been there before. I need to get there once I can travel again. Yeah. Always wanted to go.
Hey, the Bruins love to eat Flyers, Allie. I'll tell you that. They play them every day if they could.
That was a great game last Sunday. That's for sure.
It was. Bruins haven't won since, but it's okay.
I know.
Going about that.
And Jim said Sherman definitely felt guilty for Willie's death. His letters to Ellen during that time are heartbreaking. Yeah, Jim, I was reading some of his letters that he wrote around the Meridian campaign, like close to it. And he's still, he'll be writing to Ellen. He'll be talking about his son's death, the grief. And then he goes on to like another topic about what they're doing militarily. And then all of a sudden he's back to like the grief again in the same letter. So it's clearly coming into his mind quite a bit. It's so sad.
Well, that's what we talk about all the time with these people. And you talk about all these guys. We talked about Bragg. We talked about Rosecrans. We talk about, these are humans. I mean, you're dealing with the fact of losing a child, right? It isn't like, these aren't robots where you just wind up. As much as people think Sherman, some Terminator, Cyberdyne Systems, kill the South guy. He's a human. In effect, it clearly affects the Missionary Ridge. There's no doubt. And there's nothing to prove it. But I mean, just logically speaking, you lose your kid, you half-ass it. Ass factory at Missionary Ridge, right? The hell. But but then the Meridian thing, whether it's kind of a take out your frustration type
Yeah.
thing, but it clearly affected these guys. I mean, look how much Willie's that affected Lincoln and
Yeah,
freaking
exactly.
Mary
Yeah.
Lincoln. I mean, they're no different than people are today. No different.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's like one thing that's not something like, just because that part of history isn't written down doesn't mean that you can't read between the lines and see that. I mean, if you read his letters, he's grieving. He even wrote a letter to another person in the army. I can't remember who it was, or it was a governor or somebody, saying basically, I'm not in a good frame of mind. I can't seem to move past the death of my son.
Of course, I mean, think about it. You lose a child. That's awful.
Yeah, and that was his favorite. Like, he was very close with Willie. Willie was a lot like him, and he saw it. Like, I don't think he ever had, like, the closeness he had with Willie, I don't think he had with any of his other children. Like, there was just some kind of special bond there, and when that was gone, it was,
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, poor Allie. Yeah, Allie. I think the Bruins just scored again, by the way, against the Lake Tahoe. So they just got an alert, by the way. I think they just scored again. But,
yeah, Andrew said Willie was his favorite son. Yeah, he definitely was.
Yeah,
There's that really good picture of them where they're just looking at each other, and apparently, like, Willie was just like him, and
Blinky had that Willie put down the matches, look in his face.
Yeah. Well, there was one letter he wrote his kids about, it was after Shiloh, and he got them like all this ammo and these rebel guns and something, and he sent it to them, and he's like, please be careful when you're playing with this.
Okay, kids, when you go to play Massacre, please be careful. And Paul mentions, Longstreet kid, they all died of that scarlet fever, right? All within the same period of time. I mean, that does not, it absolutely affects you. I don't care who the hell you are. That's, I mean, losing a child is the worst thing in the history, is the worst by far, right? Fortunately, me or no one I know of has ever had to experience that. But you're away from home, you're in this environment.
Yeah.
And back then, that Victorian era, death is a lot different than it is now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was more of a, the good death, and there was a lot of that stuff going on, and you couldn't be there to, for funerals and wakes, and who actually does a really good job describing that is Eric in that Black Iron Mercy book.
Yeah.
When the girl dies at the beginning,
exactly.
But it talks about that, and that's one of the many good things about that book, by the way. But that's how, I mean, obviously, of course, it did. Good point, though. Did it affect his Marie? Did it get his dander up?
Yeah, that was a good point by, I think it was Andrew that made that point, that at that point probably he's at the anger stage, right? And he's like, I'm gonna fuck this shit up. And two, he's having to prove something from Missionary Ridge as well. Like that really got him, that what happened there. And yeah, he was not on his A game because mentally he wasn't that great because of his son and all that. But you look at how much that happens in the Civil War, and how many times, if you just look at Rosecrans at Chickamauga, you're going to see a guy that's not a very good general. But if you look back at Rosecrans in Tullahoma and Stones River, that's where he shines. And then that's where I started to question, okay, what's going on with him at Chickamauga? And then you realize at Stones River, he has his friend decapitated in front of him. And he kind of I think just was like, okay. And
I think Rosecrans, I think he's a guy who, he's clearly a guy with politics in his mind and the future in his mind. And, he had that cardinal sin after Iuka of bashing Grant, that Cincinnati Enquirer guy. And that kind of, and Grant, the thing about Grant, I'm glad Andrew's not on here because she'll flip out. But if Grant hated you, he hated you. You weren't getting out of that doghouse. You mentioned this morning we were talking about Hooker, right?
Yeah, that was hilarious. That scene. So a couple things about Howard's memoirs that I read this morning that were made me laugh, but also were really wow, this is an interesting viewpoint. So Howard gets to the West, and he starts out from the East end of September, and he travels by train, whatever. So he's there, and Grant comes to visit him on his train car. And they're having this meeting. And then while he's there, this person, Hooker's aide de camp, comes to deliver a message to Grant and says, Hooker would like to see you at his, he's inviting you to where his headquarters is. He would like you to, stay the night. He's going to give you dinner, all this other stuff. And Grant's like, if Hooker wants to see me, he can come to this train car. I am not going to him. Meanwhile, Grant had come to visit Howard, who's below him.
Yeah.
And it was just, I was like, whoa, there's some shade going on. Like, but the other thing I read is that as Howard is talking about this journey west, and they're going through Ohio and then they're going through Kentucky, and he's talking about how one of the only reasons they are able to get through Kentucky is because of what Rosecrans did at Stones River. And why he's able to get to Tennessee is because they're able to get to Chattanooga. And Howard writes, this is all because of Rosecrans and what he did at Stones River with Tullahoma. And it was really interesting to read that after what Grant's attitude is towards it, when Lincoln says Stones River was a victory, and Grant's like, Grant, the only reason you're in Chattanooga is because of Rosecrans.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And
it was just
Rosecrans,
interesting to read that in how I had never read that part of Howard's memoirs before. And that was like, look at me getting fired up about it. But I was like, holy shit, even Howard sees this. You know?
a noun, a verb, and Howard.
Yep. Do a shot every time she mentions Howard. I love that I can go away into any room and return a mirror. We say the word Howard every time.
He's right, you know.
It's true.
You know what's going to happen someday, Mary, is this is going to be shut off the internet, and somebody in like some planet somewhere in some other galaxy is going to watch this. And then they go, Howard must be like the president of Earth or something. That woman keeps talking about him. He must be like, whoever this guy is, he must have been in charge. He only had one arm, but he led the whole world. It's weird. That's what people are going to think.
He led the whole world.
Yeah, and she must be royalty because you keep saying she's some kind of dairy queen, you know. So she obviously knows what she's talking about.
I owned a lot of cows. Maybe that's what they're going to deduce from that.
What?
Dairy cows.
You own cows?
Yeah, I do.
What? Okay.
Can you say it was a dairy?
Can we move on? There we go.
Actually, Bo's got it's a lighthearted
awful.
question. So, in a second Civil War, what would your ranks and nicknames be? I know you've thought about this.
Oh, are we talking about what a second? What are we talking about? Second Civil
War. In a Civil War, what would your ranks and nicknames be?
Like us personally?
Yeah, or just anybody.
Oh, I don't know.
Answer that.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I'll have to think about that one. It's a fun question, though.
It's so stupid.
Anyone breathes Marisol.
Yeah. Well. No, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. That's a good one, you know. But it is pretty funny that the Howard, thank God.
Oh yeah. It was just, and then just the whole story I read about where like they started off on the trains to go west, and men were riding on top of them, and every so often one would fall off and get injured. But then they got whiskey at every place they stopped. So then these guys are getting banged up on whiskey and they're on the top of the train. And that's when Howard was like, and then people got killed. So he made it so that the alcohol stores, whatever they were, the Lickbos back then, had to be closed whenever the trains came into the town. Well, there was one resourceful bastards like giving liquor to the soldiers in this one town. And Howard's like, hey, do you want to ride in the train? And the guy's like, yeah, sure. And Howard's like, oh, we'll probably bring you back here afterwards. Like, I guess they were planning on running the train backwards. They drop him off in the next town. And Howard's like, you get to walk back now.
Oh, he's a mean one.
It's like, fuck.
You know, there's some story somewhere that Howard got into the whiskey and got ripped up by himself somewhere.
Oh, yeah,
you know?
Totally.
Probably looking at old tin types of Tilly Pierce, thinking of days
you
of
almost
yore.
said something else.
Yeah, I did. So, oh God. Anyway,
oh wow, that was.
But good. You know what? Though? It was funny that we did tie in Howard to this episode though, because he was the one who ordered the artillery attack that killed Leonidas Polk, right?
Yep.
In Atlanta.
Yep, that was a brutal death.
Snyder, you read my mind, my friend.
So
read my mind.
On him.
When she said that too.
Wayne, the aliens will be like, we're uncertain on the relationship between the Bang Barn and the Dairy Queen's livestock.
That train thing you said was almost close to a Black Hawk War situation for you, by the way.
Oh, shit. So I do it again?
Hey, whatever. You want to talk about all the how running a train, knock yourself out. You know?
I'm not even drinking. I'm glad I'm not drinking. You
Yeah,
can't
good
use that
point
as
on
a
your part.
fucking excuse. It's just me and my stupid way of speaking English, apparently, which is my first language. Sadly, I wish I could say, oh, no, it's my second language. That's why I butcher it so much.
You're the queen of the dairy queen of unintended comedy, I think it is. But
yeah,
the
at least I roll with it.
You do. You don't realize even saying it, which is the best part about it. It just
Yeah.
goes right over your head half the time.
I know.
But it's God, I'm telling you.
I probably
But
come across as a bumbling idiot.
no, not as far as you know. Definitely not. Definitely not. But going back to what we were saying before about Sherman, though, for serious though, I think a lot went into his head. I think he has the loss of Willie. I think he has the Chattanooga Missionary Ridge experience, and I think he was just bored. And I think he's wanted to do something, and he saw an opportunity. Right?
Yeah.
He's been fighting that. He's been fighting those the impulses for that total war for earlier. I think he saw that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
People's way too perceptive.
I heard that right away.
Myself,
Ryan,
I recovered though.
I know. This is my third podcast lecture day, so I'm one what stable bay pale ale and one Kentish strong ale in so far. I'm jealous. I want a beer.
Yeah, we got a couple of days left, Mary. That's it. I mean, although I'm not 100% sure you've been honest with the whole thing, I think you might have slipped one from time to time this month. I'm impressed though. You did good.
Thanks. Same here with you. Yeah. You might have.
Nope, not at all. I did not. But a couple times, like
Oh, I've had
wonder. I know you've had your moment because you've talked about it. I mean, 9 o'clock in the morning, I need a beer. Was that yesterday? The day before?
That was Tuesday.
Oh yeah, well, it is true. We have to hold up till Monday.
Yep.
And Al, you know what? When all seriousness, what stinks about it is that why couldn't today be March 1st?
I know.
Be a different story.
I'd be able to deal with this a little bit, but whatever.
Gods have not been nice to us, but it's okay. It's okay.
Drink my peach iced tea.
Well, we'll be doing our Facebook our roundtable here in a few weeks, and that'll be on St. Patty's Day. It will not be dry that day. Can't wait to see Ryan that day. Can you imagine?
Oh God, because he's going to be coming onto this later.
God, imagine how many fucking Jesus comments are going to come out of his mouth that day. Yeah, that'll be a great one. I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Oh, me too.
But you said, I mean, what was interesting about going back to Meridian though? Again, trying to get back on target because that's whatever. Was how much Washington wanted no part of Sherman doing this, but it was Grant, right? Who's like, yeah, let him do it. Yeah, because that could have gone badly.
Well, the other reason why they did it was because that they needed that complete control of the river, but as well, like they needed to draw troops away from going back to Chattanooga or whatever too. And I think it was just a way to kind of a distraction, but also to see if it would work and just to kind of have that firm hold they needed before they moved on to taking Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta was always the goal, I think, at that point. But this allowed them to do the Atlanta campaign as well. I think.
I have a Redbreast tasting on the 10th. Ooh. I still got a half a bottle of Redbreast, Ryan, for that. I'm going to save that for the round table. But Andrew mentions weather. That's the one thing. We kind of touched on the weather a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll talk a lot more about the weather when we do Peerage next week.
Yeah.
Was people don't realize how much the weather impacted these, right?
Exactly.
It's just the snow and the sleet and the fruit. We talked about it with Donaldson last week, right? But certainly there was issues with the weather with this one.
Well, that's why his face was delayed, Smith, because he's waiting for that one guy to get down the Mississippi, and there was fear Mississippi would freeze over that year, and that they wouldn't be able to do any kind of transport.
Well, Sherman's talking about the Mississippi being like mushy and frozen, and that's a big part of it, though. I mean that's a huge part of it, though. Yeah. And when we talk about Pea Ridge, we talk about Earl Van Dorn walking in the snow up to his chest. Imagine you in the snow, your chest, we go 10 feet over here. But walking, basically having to trudge through 3 feet of snow, just marching as they're heading up through Arkansas. And so that'll be when we talk about that in more detail next week. We'll talk about that. Yeah,
no, and it's an interesting kind of so you have Henry and Donaldson, and then you have Pea Ridge, and then you have Shiloh. The comments today. Oh my God.
I ran the train at the Bang Bar. We got a picture with that with the old Butterfield on there. It'd be a pretty good T-shirt with the sunglasses.
You'll be able to have fun with the memes next week with the EVD and the Bang Bar.
Maybe writing some Buell chorus in that place. I'll tell you that right now. but I, and that's the thing. We always try to talk about the weather with all these just because.
Yeah.
And I think Gettysburg gets a lot of talk about the weather because the heat and that one guy from Pennsylvania College who recorded the temperature. Mm-hmm. But weather was a huge issue with all these, but this one was too.
Yeah. Well, they talk a lot about in Trudeau's Southern Storm. He makes mention of the weather in every chapter, I think, on each day, because the soldiers would record it. And he said from one end of the march to the other, like, if you think about this, whatever it was, the 60-mile wide that they're cutting through Georgia, the temperature could be between 10 and 15 degrees different.
If you read like Abner Small's diary, that the Road to Richmond I always talk about, he talks about the weather all the time. But who cared about the weather was the soldiers, right? They had to live in this shit. So when they're writing their diaries, they always comment about the weather. Today was cold, today was hot, today was rainy. But you don't read about that in the Coddingtons of the world, these because they're talking more about the stuff. But when you read
that's
those,
what Jim mentions is the diaries. The soldiers talked to. Jim mentions that too.
Oh, he's right though, because when you're talking about, when you look at big picture like Fonz, they're talking about movements and attack strategies. You talk a little picture, small picture. You talk about these diaries. You talk about these soldiers who had to live in this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you hear a lot about that stuff. So if you have that's why I always say read those ones first, because that's the best resources, because you get a real good flavor for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Snyder said he's reading the history of the 90th Ohio Volunteer Infantry, and almost every entry is about the weather. And then Jim says DC weather was recorded every day by the Smithsonian Institute as well. But yeah, the weather is something that really, like Shiloh, when we talk about Shiloh, we're going to talk about how the weather kind of fucked up what Beauregard wanted to do, right?
The weather at Shiloh, we'll talk about that, I guess, probably April, right?
Yeah.
Shiloh, that thunderstorm, that 2-day thunderstorm, really that. You want to talk about bailing the Union out, Grant Sherman, right? Because that allowed Buell time to come down and bail them out. Where if they had good weather and Beauregard gets in there, how that could have changed, right? Where's Grant going to retire to? Where's he going to go? He's right against the Pittsburgh Landing. He might have been. That could have been a tough situation. We talk about Sherman almost getting caught at Decatur, right? How close, maybe Grant, is it a situation where perhaps he's risking being caught at Shiloh, and how that changes everything.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these third-party things like weather affect more.
And they don't get talked about as much. But as you said, like you and Jim make a great point about the diaries and letters, or where they mention it quite a bit. And I think, Sherman mentions it sometimes in his letters too. I haven't really encountered Howard mentioning it much in his memoirs at all. Like the generals don't mention it much. But yeah, that's one thing I like about Southern Storm is that, Trudeau does talk about the weather, and that like when Sherman decided to do his march was completely based on weather and weather patterns from previous years, because he figured by that time in November, the heavy rains would have stopped that usually are part of the fall in that part of the country.
John, my great grandfather was part of the 91st Ohio Volunteer. Oh, awesome. That's awesome, John. I think it's amazing how many people, if you look, even if you don't think you have any Civil War relatives, you look back, you probably do. I know I do.
I don't.
I mean, most people. You never know.
I guess I should look into it. I know there was guys from my town that fought.
It's very possible. I mean, that was a big deal. But but weather is a big deal, and you're right. It doesn't get talked about enough. The soldier guys, their diaries, they talk about a lot, and Trudeau does in Southern Storm, and a lot of them do, but a lot of them don't, right? You want to talk about, again, going back to Ken Masterson's book, The Retreat of Gettysburg, the weather that affected Kilpatrick going through Monterey Pass, the rain because that rained on July 4th and never didn't stop raining for a while. It wasn't like you hear about how it rained hard the day after the battle, and that's the end of it. It rained for a good couple of days, and it affected that retreat. Basically right back to the Potomac. And anybody I'll tell you, want to talk about a sneaky little fun trip, Mary, is take the Lee Retreat tour, right?
I'm definitely doing that post-COVID.
So you start at Gettysburg, obviously, and you kind of go through the Chambersburg Pike, and you head down that road, and you go through Monterey Pass of the mountains, you go over to Williamsport, and you can see the exact place where they landed. And there's a really cool picture you can see where it shows all the Confederate wagons lined up on the river in these fields. and you can see the field. It's exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't obviously take a boat over it. There's a bridge you drive over. You go to Falling Waters where Pettigrew got killed, and you go right from there and you take the same road right to Winchester. And it's all marked along the way. That's a great little trip.
I want to do that.
A fun little road trip. We did that last summer with our friend Bill, and it takes a good part of the day, especially if you go to Winchester and you discover the bars in old Winchester. It takes the rest of the day.
That would be my thing to do. History and going to bars. Amazing.
But that's a fun little thing though. Not as good as the John Wilkes Booth Escape tour, admittedly, but the Lee Retreat tour is a fun trip. Monterey Pass, anybody who's been there, it's got a little battlefield, it's got a little area, got a canyon, a little visitor center, and no one goes there. I mean, but it's really, really neat.
Yeah, it's sometimes those lesser known ones that are really cool to go to. And just speaking of Gettysburg and all that, Mark is going to. It's overcast but no rain, so he's sitting down there today. His 16-year-old daughter is going to go too. And he said, after being resuscitated, I said, sure. She wants to see day one stuff. Happy to oblige. I'll show her where the 11th Corps set up and where they started to skedaddle. First Corps broke first.
Take him to the Wills Woods, Mark. You want to go to Cutler's Brigade, John Cleveland Robinson, the 2nd Division. There you go. You want to see where the First Corps broke first. That's where you want to take him.
I will die on that rolling hill.
Yeah. When you start drinking it, you'll be in a swale. So we'll see once again. But it's true though. Did Mark say he's doing the retreat? Is that what he said?
No, he's going to where the 11th Corps set up and where they started to skedaddle.
Oh yeah.
That's why I said First Corps broke first.
Right down by Gettysburg College, right where the baseball field is. Yeah. It's a cool little area down there.
In reference to the weather, Elsie said the Mud March. For the weather.
Oh, we talked about the Mud March. That was another one. That could have changed history. Weather changed history a lot. You would be really surprised.
It did.
Yeah.
Andrew said come to Vicksburg. Post-COVID, that will happen.
Yeah, that's on the game plan, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Talk about that. Go see old Leonard down there too.
Yep.
Where's Leonard? Is Leonard on here somewhere?
No, he's not. No.
Leonard was.
I think Leonard and Andrew, and then you got in on it too with how Soy Smith looks like Voldemort.
Yeah. God. I thought Leonard was still pissed about those Pittsburgh Steelers comments yesterday too. But maybe I gone a little too far, yeah, DC drinking tour. I'll tell you what's a great place to drink, Bo, is the old Ebbet right there. You drink those old fashions right in front of the original U.S. Grant painting in there in the back. And then right across the street, there's a place called Shelley's Backyard, I think it is. It's a great little cigar bar right across from it. But down by the Willard, Mary, right there.
I miss cigars.
Yeah, cigars are great. I'll probably have one today, as a matter of fact. Stuff for some friggin' raining. But it's nothing better than a good cigar.
I'm waiting till I cross the border again, and I'm in Gettysburg to have one. I'm on a moratorium until that time.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Just actually speaking, since we have Bo on here, Bo's actually got his own podcast about, I think it's about historical friendships.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bo, drop a link to your podcast, man. Yeah. Might as well promote yourself. Absolutely. Yeah. Been to the cigar bar. Oh, so he's been at that cigar bar. That cigar bar is really, really cool. But if you go, what happens is you go to there's a place in the old Ebbet Grill right near the White House, right by the Willard, and you go in there and you got to walk to the back. In the back, there's a little bar that's part of the Willard that no one goes in, right? Mm-hmm. And there's an old English style pub little bar. And there's an original painting of U.S. Grant when he's leaning against a tree. That's where the painting is, right? And there's a bartender there. She makes the best old fashions.
Love old fashions.
Get the old fashioned. And I'll have to tweet this picture. Every time I go, I take a picture with the old fashioned from the painting. I was there a few months ago down in DC before. Yeah. Actually, it was before COVID. It was
before COVID.
You know who I ran into at that bar, Mary, of all people, politically, was Ann Coulter.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You want to talk about different real life than she is on TV. Holy God. She's definitely playing a character on that TV because that's not the way the stuff she was coming out of her mouth was not the stuff that comes out of her mouth on TV. I'll tell you that right now.
So Bo said, thanks, guys. Oh, you're welcome, Bo. It's called Bromances of History. Lincoln and Seward is ongoing right now. It's very cool.
We'll definitely have to
romances in history.
Romance in history. We have a lot of those, right?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot in the Civil
Obviously,
War.
Sherman and Grant, probably.
Sherman Grant, yep.
Hood and Fremantle.
Yep. Hardy and Claiborne.
Hardy and Claiborne, right?
Can we say that Jeff Davis with Bragg and Polk?
Oh yeah,
Some
absolutely.
kind of weird three.
Yeah, that's who I think of. Jeff Davis with anybody. According, yeah, I'm not gonna say it like that long, but anyway, but definitely check out those places. That cigar bar in DC is the best. But that Willard, you go back there with that picture. It's like one of those dimly lit little places, and that's you just sit in the back and just sit there. And
those are my favorite types of places to go.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a place here in Goddard's that makes a really good old fashioned.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Good old fashioned is the absolute best. Nothing better.
I know. Yeah, someone said it was Mark that said between Allie B and Ryan, he's been quite book enabled.
God.
Yeah. Jim too is good at book enabling as well.
No, you guys all are.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody read more than Allie Biddles does, though. I mean, she's like a speed reader. It takes me a while to read a good book, and
me too.
Somehow she goes through it, Darren and Buckner, Bill Buckner. Wow. Okay, well, that's
Wayne Lee and Traveler.
Snyder coming in hot right there. You know what's so funny about that? I was kind of on the young side for that '86 World Series, but it sucks they lost. But the one that got me was 2003 when they lost to the Yankees. That's the one that got me. They won the next year, thank God. Okay, go Sox. But that was Bill Buckner. God, wow.
Bo said he ran into Doris Kearns Goodwin at that bar, and they also
really
meant juleps.
Yeah, that's kind of the place. It's a touristy little place, but it's still the place where a lot of the people go. Like you see a lot of Politico type people in there, like a lot of the West Wingy people and all the Capitol people when you go there now.
That's very cool.
But I wish I could read faster, though. There's no question about it. James Buchanan, Rufus, yeah.
I've never been a quick reader at all. Matt and I start I have 3 different books on the go and all that, but I really have to take my time when I read.
Plus, you move your lips when you read too, which is kind of weird.
What?
Just kidding. Implying you were horsing around. Ooh. But no, yeah. So definitely check that out. I didn't realize you never mentioned that before. I'm surprised I didn't know that.
What's that?
His podcast about the bromances.
Yeah, I keep forgetting to mention it, which I feel bad about, but
must have slipped your mind. But that's pretty cool. I mean, there's a lot of Jacob has got his really good podcast on here, the history book, which is good. People doing that. There's a lot of good ones.
There's quite a few good podcasts out there too. There's another Civil War one called Civil War Files, which I've been listening to.
Is that the one with that cup? No, that's the
No, this is the one I listened to the other day that I told you about. That they had an episode about secession as well. It's actually interesting. It was very interesting.
Okay. There's a lot of good podcasts with Civil War stuff, but we're blessed with that. There's a lot of good stuff to listen to,
Yeah.
And it's great to just sit back and just kind of listen to this stuff. It's fun. I mean, I think it's such a small little esoteric community that when you find something that you like, you grab onto it because it's just so different, watching Catching Hell, but yeah. That whole Bill Buckner thing was that was thank God that didn't happen in the social media world. That would have been bad. But they've won since, so you can't control the Bartman thing. Chicago Cubs, they beat your Indians, Mary, a couple of years ago. I don't know if you know that the World Series, but that was one. If the Cubs had lost that one, that would have been Bartman still to this day. But that was different though. That was some fans sticking his hands out. But even that, the Cubs still could have won that game. It's overrated stuff,
Oh, Jacob's here. He had to go buy shoes. Did you go to Gettysburg?
Must have gone to the ass factory too.
Jeez.
Hey, Jacob.
Another podcast called A Place and Time, which just covered the old soldiers' home. I haven't heard of that one. Check that out.
Either.
Lots of different ones. Mark B is headed out for the day, so thank you for stopping by, Mark.
Yeah, have fun, Mark. Have a great day on the old battlefield, you bastard. I wish I could be out there. God.
Soon. Soon
Anyway.
it'll happen.
I know.
But anyway, he didn't go to Gettysburg. That's a myth. Everybody's jumping all over the Gettysburg shoe thing.
You know what? That was funny. There's a couple of things speaking of the Ken Burns thing, right? Of course,
Yeah.
a lot of people like me are, you focus on Gettysburg just because the couple things he got wrong, Ken Burns, right, was the shoe thing, which is a perception. But the other thing he said, and you and I both agree that our favorite part of the battlefield, battle was the first day, right?
Yep.
Was the first day.
I'm a first day junkie. Yeah.
Right. Me too. I mean, that's my favorite part of the battlefield. It's my favorite place to study. But he says in his thing that the first day's battle was a minor skirmish. That's what he says, which is just wrong.
It is. It was not a minor
It's like
skirmish.
12,000 soldiers and all these
That's
corps.
like also insulting Buford and what his men did with managing to hold them back long enough for Howard and Hancock to both kind of be able to assess the situation. To say it's a minor skirmish is just, I've never agreed with that.
No, but he says that. And I remember, there's a couple things here and there about that, but for the most part, it's pretty. Someone said they were going to try to redo that. Maybe I dreamt that, but didn't someone say they were going to redo that, or they were going to do a new one?
There's talk of doing an updated Civil War documentary.
Mm-hmm.
It was on Twitter that it was mentioned.
Oh, okay. That'd be kind of cool.
I think it's like, I mean, I still enjoy Ken Burns, but you kind of take some of it with a grain of salt, especially now that new research has been done and.
I mean, that was back in like the 80s they made that, right? Like
late 80s, yeah.
And so obviously a lot's historically has changed on it, but he covered most of the big things, right? But again, if you study this stuff as deeply as a lot of us do, you're going to notice you're going to notice little things that aren't right. But that's fine. I mean, it's like you guys were going on about your Rail Splitter, your other podcast you do, right? You guys are doing the Lincoln coverage one, the one you guys just dropped, and people think it's too basic.
There's a lot of people that didn't like the first episode because they thought it was too rushed. And then they enjoyed the second episode a lot more because it slowed down. But I don't think there's a lot, like I was thinking about it after, there's not a lot about Lincoln's early life that you could have slowed it down anymore. And a lot of people, like they're catering to an audience that is not as into Lincoln as, some people are or whatever. And, they've got to do that kind of overview because a lot of people are just interested in Lincoln right before the Civil War and during the Civil War, like during his presidency, right? Like that's how they know him and that's what they want.
Again, you're talking about, we're not talking about some high level C-SPAN nerdery one-on-one thing. You're talking about, this is kind of a high level overview of Lincoln on CNN. I think it's on CNN to basically just get it out there. Kudos to them. I think it's great that they're humanizing Lincoln, that they're talking about the colonization thing.
Yep.
They're talking about his attitude towards slavery in general. That they're making him, that he didn't fall out of heaven to liberate the world either. It just doesn't happen. But it does talk about how he. Well, I assume how it's going to talk about how he evolved and how he did what he did. But they're making it a very human level with him, which I think is really neat.
Talking about podcasts.
We're talking about back to the elite after the.
But no, it does put Lincoln on a very human level. I like that they said just because he was for the abolishing slavery did not mean that he thought they were equal. He basically thought 90% of people of his time that he was.
That's the key. What you just said was people at the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes people tend to put 2021 into 1861 and think that people thought the same way, and they just didn't. I mean, it's just the reality, right?
Exactly.
No,
and
a lot of and then but a lot of people are still stuck in that mode. You read that book that we keep talking about, Ty, what's his name?
Yeah,
the Robert Lee.
Yeah, Robert E. Lee and me. Yeah.
And he talks a lot about that, right? He talks about his attitudes he had. He talks about Washington Elite College, about how the whole attitude with him with that. It's fascinating. I'm sure everyone's seen that book or read the book by now, but that's must reading. That's up there with Confederates in the Attic as far as you have.
Oh, it is. I'm telling so many people to read it. And like I said, I got it. Well, I can say it online. I got it for my mother for her birthday, which is this Thursday, because that's a book she needs. She'll enjoy it. Seeing here. Yeah. Hi, Benjamin. He's checking in late. Well, we're usually on here for a couple hours, so welcome. Elsie said, speaking of a good drink, half Spaten, I'm going to butcher this, half Schoffer Hofer Radler beer with a shot of Goldschlager and call it an 11th Corps.
There you go.
Speaking of 11th Corps, we get to talk about Siegel.
It wasn't the 11th Corps though, but yeah, we'll talk about
I know,
about Franz Siegel. He doesn't do too good, Mary. Beginning of P Ridge, not gonna lie to you. He gets pantsed a little bit by McCullough, but we'll talk about that.
Yep.
So that'll be a fun one to talk about, but about that whole thing. But it's that does sound like a pretty good drink though. I still have a case of German beer in my garage with a mix of different varieties of different German good stuff.
How very
Sunny Monday, I can drink it again.
Yes!
Sunny Monday. Yay.
I know, I've got beer staring me back every time I open my fucking fridge.
Oh, I've got a fridge full of Treehouse and Trillium just staring at me right now, saying, "Dude, what's up here? What's wrong with you?" You know. But I think it's interesting as we talk about these early battles. I know Ryan. Speaking of Ryan,
Ryan's early Civil War.
I think of drinking. I think of Ryan, and I think of the early part of the Civil War. Mine just works right there. But that part, it's fascinating. And I guess Meridian's not really the early part of the war; it's more the later part of the war. But going back to P Ridge, it's interesting to see how things kind of formulate, right?
Yeah.
And not to give away the surprise, but P Ridge obviously. Earl Van Dorn wants to basically retake Missouri. He wants to capture St. Louis, like many a Red Sox team has done over the years, Mary, destroy St. Louis, right? And what he wants to do is basically reestablish control of Missouri, that border state with the Confederacy. And he gets pushed back and ends up being a pretty interesting fight that we'll talk about. But it shows like that part of the war, how things are always evolving, right?
Yeah.
Any one of these things, we talk about Stones River, right? Donaldson, how any one of these things goes the other way, it changes all of it, right? It's a big house of cards, and you pull one wrong card, the whole thing collapses. And everything kind of worked its way out.
Stones River was the big one that had it gone the other way, the war would have been so different. It would have been a lot harder to get Chattanooga. Nashville might have been lost again. Why St. Louis? Not even the Rams wanted him. Van Dorn was trying to prove a point.
Jake, have you been to Cleves Landing with some good bars down there? That's probably why they wanted to take it. I mean, it has Van Dorn in mind. Keep that in mind, But St. Louis was a big. St. Louis was a big manufacturing center. It was a big. It would have been a big psychological thing to capture St. Louis too.
Yeah.
St. Louis. Have you been to St. Louis, Mary? It's not the best city. Not gonna lie to you. Not the best town.
I mean, I do want to go there to see Sherman's grave.
Yeah, I was there. I didn't see Sherman's grave. I didn't see it.
I should have went when I was in Springfield.
There you go. That's kind of far from St. Louis, isn't it?
Like a couple hours.
Is it? Well, all right. But it could have been a very interesting battle. And we'll have fun to talk about P Ridge. P Ridge will be a good one.
No, I'm looking forward to it.
That arch, Jacob, just so you know, I did go in the arch. You wait 2 hours to get in there, and you go up, take the elevator, and you go up to the top, and you see the city, which is great. But you know what the best part of seeing the city is the arch. You can't see it because you're in it. So it's kind of defeats the entire purpose.
It's overrated.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I'll remember that next time, or when I'm there. I've never been there before.
St. Louis, good ballpark though. Good Cardinals place. The new stadium.
Ryan just said that Ireland crushed Italy. I'm assuming in rugby, 41-10.
Wow.
Pineapple seltzer water.
Yeah. Okay.
So fucking suspicious.
I was like Pavlovian, like,
it's like, oh, what are you doing with that?
I see Bayfield on that side of that can. Okay, fine. But I think studying these battles though, these ones are a lot of fun though, because I don't want to say, like Gettysburg and Teedham, they're all big, but people talk about them all the time. I mean, for God's sakes, and they're a podcast specifically just dedicated to each of those.
Which is awesome. They all have their place. But I think the thing that I really realized with doing this episode is that you can't silo every part of the Civil War into its own separate thing. Like when you talk about it, you have to think, okay, what effects did this have? How does it factor into the whole puzzle of the Civil War? Like when you look at Meridian, and I came away from it thinking like, wow, if you're going to study the March to the Sea, have a look at Meridian, because you see, this is where a lot of it begins, right? His ideas, he knew in the March to the Sea, he needed to have more cavalry doing the screening, because of what happened on the Meridian campaign with having to march very narrow because the rebel cavalry were constantly at him. So he learned a lot of things and he took it with him to the march, right? So I think it's an important thing to study in having a better understanding of the march, know that it wasn't just born, a few weeks before or whatever. It was,
No,
it started actually in the Vicksburg campaign.
Well, we talked about this before, going back, even staying in the East. We talked about how Manassas led into, into Antietam, and how the whole thing, the second Manassas rather.
Yeah.
So they all kind of feed into each other. But what's interesting about the Western ones was it just seemed like these, out of all of them, it's like if you capture A, you get to move to B. If you capture B, you get to go to C.
Yeah.
But if you screw up C, you go all the way back to A again.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It was more of a zero-sum game in the West, where obviously Chickamauga was a big loss at that time, for the Union, but they fell back to Chattanooga, and they were able to, because the whole Cracker line, they were able to get out of there. And so it's that could have been the end right there in the West. Really think about it, right? If Bragg, sorry Jacob, if Bragg does a better job, it maybe. And Grant doesn't come in, that Rosecrans is still there. Maybe he takes it. Maybe he bags that whole army, Donaldson style. Right?
I'm going to risk getting laughed at here again, but Howard does talk about what happened at Chickamauga in his memoirs, because it was on September 24th that he got called to Washington and he got told, you are going to go out west and you're going to help reinforce Bragg. You and Slocum are going to go do that.
Yeah.
And he actually praises Bragg, saying that it was a loss, but Bragg had managed to go back and was still holding Chattanooga, which was the important thing. And he talks about how he utilized the kind of what the rebels had already done there with these fortifications, that he was utilizing them. And he says Bragg was holding his own, but they needed reinforcements there. Or not Bragg, Rosecrans was holding his own, but they needed the reinforcements there because, and then, Howard talks about how Bragg has set up and has made it into, like, they're talking about this could become a siege, and that's why they're wanting to get the reinforcements there. But he also talks about how they've set up is such that there's no easy way to get into Chattanooga. And he's talking about how you have to go like 40 miles out of your way. And when he's making his way there, eventually, like he said, it was the roughest terrain he and his men had ever been on, what they had to walk over. But he praises Rosecrans for saying, he lost, but he manages to hold Chattanooga. And he's kind of saying, why did nobody talk about that more?
No. Oh, it was Rosecrans' idea. The Cracker Line was his idea that Grant stole on him. I mean, he did.
Yeah, Allie, reinforce Bragg. Yes, I meant reinforce Howard. I meant reinforce Howard.
No, the thing. Yeah, well, it's good. You make a mistake to jump you on it.
Yeah, I know. Oh, it's fine. I got going on it, and I just was like,
yell at her when you criticizes her. You're cute. That's how it works out. Fuck you.
Okay.
Yeah, but no. The Bragg thing. It's interesting because that was a good look. Longstreet had a big part of the Chickamauga thing.
Howard mentions him quite a bit, actually, saying how he's there holding stuff for Bragg as well.
It was a good plan though. Even Chattanooga wasn't a bad plan, right? He held Missionary Ridge, he held Lookout Mountain. I think once that Cracker Line opened, that was the end. That was a stroke of genius by Rosecrans that Grant eventually picked up on, because he was going to starve them out. And the funny part about it was, if that was a northern city, they would have shelled it. They didn't shell the city because it was a southern city, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he was in a hard place.
Because the Rebs couldn't shell their own city, so they had to literally starve them out to make them leave. They couldn't just pound on them a la Vicksburg. So that's where you get lucky with these things. But I think Bragg is a good luck. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Bragg's the greatest thing in the world. But what I will say is he's not as bad as people think he is. He's just
no, he's not. That's one thing I've learned. Ryan said the Cracker Line was an idea that was stolen upwards. Baldy Smith to Rosecrans to Grant.
Yeah, look, it's not exactly rocket science to sneak food in there, and that was the obvious place to do it. But they did it.
But Rosecrans should have got a little bit more credit.
Right, but like anybody who has a corporate job knows that any idea you take, your boss is going to take on you.
Exactly.
Any idea you have. God knows, happened to me a million times. But
but
it's
in my past life, as other jobs I've had, that has happened. It's
thank you.
fun.
Drive up.
Drive up, fucker.
but no, but I mean, I think Grant did the best he could. I mean, Bragg did rather. I mean, what was he supposed to do? Like he said, he couldn't shell the city. He thought he had them shut down. Now, when Osterhaus and Hooker, those guys ended up taking Lookout Mountain, I think that was certainly a surprise. But Sheridan, he not Sheridan. Claiborne did his thing on Missionary Ridge, right? They just couldn't have it. They just didn't have enough.
Yep. Rolling rocks down at people. That was a great strategy too.
Well, the problem they had too is they had those gun pits at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah.
And they put the cannon on the top, which didn't make any sense. But
good for Claiborne and Claiborne and then Hardy are out there all hours, and he's like, we have to reinforce, because Claiborne realizes it's possibly Sherman coming at him, right? So he's like, okay, we have to reinforce this shit. But I mean, Claiborne was just, I mean, he was talented. John P says Grant never personally took credit for it. That's a myth. Which, yeah, maybe just what I've read about, how I've read the bios is that he sort of did, but maybe that isn't one of the Grant.
I don't know if he flat out said, I take credit for this, but he certainly alluded to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, he was not very nice to Hooker or Rosecrans.
No.
Especially when Hooker arrived.
But Grant was also a guy who wanted to make sure that when the musical chairs stopped, Mary,
don't do that.
when it stopped, that he was going to be the guy. But again, it's all memory of man, and it's just what it is. But it'd be interesting to see where that all came from. But I'm pretty
Baldy
sure.
Smith mentioned, Allie B said Baldy Smith was given credit in the memoirs. So poor no Rosecrans. Good morning, Lisa.
Oh, what's up, Lisa? She's the teacher in the class that we are in, the nameless and the faceless of the Civil War. You may remember Lisa. She was on our podcast when we talked about Asia Booth.
It was a really interesting episode. It was a really good discussion that we had.
That was a good one. Her class is pretty interesting though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if anybody is looking for like a kind of different way to learn about the Civil War through poetry, Nameless and the Faceless of the Civil War. You can get it on Amazon. It's I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, it's a lot of poetry she's written. It's really good poetry too, but it's historical poetry. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
but
it's really good. Hey Tony, greetings from California. Wow, it's still pretty early there too. That's awesome.
8:30 in the morning, right?
Yep, I think so. Yeah, they're 3 hours. They're 3 hours.
Didn't you screw up the whole Australia thing last week?
I did.
Last week?
I did.
Speaking of time.
Yeah, I thought they were like 24 hours. Hey, Mark.
Hey.
Yeah, Mark from our class is here too, actually.
Oh, hey.
Hey, cool.
Hey, Mark. How you doing? Thanks for jumping on. Hope she hasn't mortified you yet. But it's good talk about this stuff though, because it's just a lot of these different things we talk about, and but I do we have kind of found our sweet spot though in the West with this stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still enjoy the Eastern theater, and it needs to be studied too, but I'm finding, like, I think because the Western theater doesn't have that voice, and I'm seeing so much of what happens in the West does affect the East as well. But it's also kind of like, you said last week, it's like the island of misfit toys out there. Like, there's so many interesting stories and so many just there's bumbling that happens, and like everybody's fighting and all this other stuff. I just have to answer. Benjamin asked, the book I bought my mother was Robert E. Lee and Me by Ted Sedgley. It's a new book that's out about a guy that believed in the lost cause, but now does not. And
that book is almost like his 250-page apology, right? Like, I'm sorry, to quote you all the time, sorry. But that's what it was. He talks about all these things, but it's a really, really good book though. It certainly is. Mark, you're down in Louisiana. Yeah, it's nice down there.
Yep. John P. does say that too many historians have given Grant too much credit for Chattanooga. Yeah, because
we give him credit for Grant for everything. I mean,
I know, but Lookout Mountain was not just romance. I hate that.
Romance.
Grant in his memoir says it's pure romance.
Oh, I thought you were talking about like Civil War After Dark or something. Where were you going with this one?
The Western
the Tilly
theater,
Pierce story. I said Tilly this time, by the way. No, but I mean, he did call it just romance, and
Yeah,
he
and it
did
wasn't.
say Stone's River wasn't a victory. I mean, he did say a lot of things,
Yeah, so he is
right?
in some ways molding history for
Well, but he's
himself.
not the first to do it. I mean, look,
No.
Grant's a gen. He's one of the three greatest generals this country's ever had. There's no
Yeah,
question.
oh no, he
But
is very
but again,
supremely talented.
but again, he does get a lot of credit for stuff, like a lot of
Yeah,
these guys.
because I mean, I think one of the reasons they got Chattanooga was half because of Hooker and the other because of Thomas. Because Thomas just let his men go, and Grant's like, "Why are those men going up the hill? They haven't been ordered to go up there." And Thomas is like,
Well, Thomas had been there for
"I don't
months
know."
because he bailed on Chickamauga so quick and let everybody just rot over there on on Snodgrass Hill. Screw you guys, I'm going to Chattanooga. But he had time to set up a camp there, right?
But the fact that Thomas had been there.
See, the rock at Chickamauga was a rolling rock, Mary. It rolled towards Chattanooga.
Over
Right?
hills.
It was an undulating rock, actually.
Jeez.
If you really want to talk about it. But no, but he look, it's not no one's bashing Grant by any stretch of imagination,
No.
but it's just that he does have a track record of minimizing,
What
certain
happened?
things.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Bo said he lives on Lookout Mountain. There's a little romance, and Allie said Lookout Mountain is the place for romance when Hooker was on it. That's like your the Sky Barn thing.
Oh, that's right.
For the meme for that.
Rumor has there was an ass factory up there, Mary. God, never could live that down.
Jacob says Thomas for the win. Yeah, I mean, Hooker and Thomas are why they managed to get Chattanooga. And I mean, when Grant arrives in Chattanooga, Thomas has been there the entire time, and he's kind of like, the reception for Grant wasn't the greatest. Like there was a lot of tension in the room when Grant walked in there and all that. But Thomas knew stuff, and Grant just kind of at times would brush him aside and say like, "Oh, I know what I'm doing." And Thomas is like, "But I've been here the whole time."
Yeah, well, he definitely was though. I mean, Thomas did a great. He did a lot of great things. I mean, he's a guy who doesn't get enough credit because he's overshadowed by Sherman and he's by Grant. A lot of these.
He
guys,
doesn't advocate for himself though. He's a lot like Buford in that way.
Well, plus his family destroyed all his notes afterwards too.
Well, he told
but if those things had lived and there was a lot of book written about Thomas, it might be a different thing. It's funny though, the guys who obviously wrote a lot more because of this history, they're the ones who are more popular, more famous about it. But
then you say that Howard has memoirs. Why isn't he as well known as Grant and Sherman?
I think Howard's a victim of historical reputation, and I think that's part of it too. And like we talked about on that Facebook thing this morning, right? On the Gettysburg thing. But I think it's interesting though. Hey Jay.
Yeah, hey Jay. Yes, Jacob says Thomas doesn't get enough credit. No, he doesn't. But I think in some ways he doesn't advocate for himself, but also I don't know if he wanted the credit either. Like he was just a guy that went out there and did what he needed to do. And when Grant was like, "Why are those guys charging up Missionary Ridge?" Thomas is like, "I don't know. Whatever, let him go." Like, let him go.
I know. It's funny to think about going back in time, being in these places and seeing how the whole thing's actually went. You get a good feel if you study enough to get a good idea of how it probably went. And I don't think any of these things were as organized as they are there in the James McPherson's Battle for Freedom books and stuff like that. I think a lot of it is a hodgepodge, it's mayhem, it's chaos. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, exactly. I think there was Chattanooga, Chickamauga, those are very chaotic battles because the communication has been so messed up, right? And like when you have the breakthrough happen because Wood has to move, that was something I think the order that Garfield wrote out. Yeah. And he got it wrong. And then because they didn't understand the positioning, and also their sight lines are all screwed up because of the terrain. So then Wood's like, okay, I guess I'll move my men, but that's going to create a gigantic hole, but okay,
Yeah. Well, the terrain's a big part of it. I mean, you go to Gettysburg or you go to Antietam, you think these battlefields are all wide open like that. They're not. Most of them, Chickamauga, the Wilderness, Kernstown's open, but it's kind of a small one. It's mostly woods. I mean, you talk about these guys firing these cannons, these hundreds of yards. You usually didn't fire on something you couldn't see. Mm-hmm. In half of these battles, you couldn't see it. And so
no, and then you mix in because if you're in wooded terrain, like the Wilderness, as well as like Chickamauga, like when you're like when I was where Longstreet's troops would have been coming up during the Snodgrass Hill thing, I was like, if this was happening at dusk, I wouldn't be able to see because of all the smoke from the gunfire and stuff too, right? Like I would have fucking been the one to crash into a tree and went rolling down the hill and take out.
Well, I mean, this is before the age of smokeless, gunpowder.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were talking about, there was studies done, at Pickett's Charge even, Mary, where they determined, I don't know how the hell they determined this, but they determined during the Battle of Pickett's Charge with all the artillery, with the smoke, that, like 95% of the field was covered by smoke and you could only see stuff in silhouette.
Yeah.
So you're shooting at just flashes, so of course, you can't see what you're shooting at. And that's where the Abner Small diary comes in really, really handy, as they talk about that, where you can't see what's going on around you. I mean, you're talking about guys like Iverson going across the field and, and getting gunned down by the 12th Mass guys, Gettysburg, stuff like that. But you couldn't see them. I mean, everything is covered by the smoke and the undulations, Mary.
Rolling hills.
Of the fields, right? But seriously though,
Ben just said that it's a largely, the smoke on the field is a largely underrated aspect. Wasn't that something we talked about with the Battle of Lookout Mountain, that the smoke actually, the way the smoke and some kind of like the moon or something was illuminated the men in the smoke, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the great equalizer is the smoke.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about the fact of, there's 100, let's go real quick, Pickett's Charge, we mentioned it, right? Rebs had 147 guns. Okay. The Union had 122. That's 269 guns firing for 2 straight hours on a field where there was no wind. It just hung. Think of all the smoke that caused from those guns. You couldn't see shit in front of you. Now you've got 12,000 guys marching. Now they weren't shooting originally, but once the musketry started, that adds more of it. You could only see what's in front of you, and even that you probably couldn't see that much. Everything you saw was probably shadows.
Yeah.
So you think about these fields of going, I'm going to go back and watch Pickett's Charge and see what it was like. You weren't going to see anything. All you would have seen was like a fight in the cloud, and that's you don't talk about that a lot.
Yeah, no, but I can't imagine. And then when you and I go to Chickamauga, like, and we go to Snodgrass Hill and go down into the woods to where Longstreet's men were, and I think it was where there's a North Carolina marker down there. Like, just to think at dusk with the smoke. Like I said, I would have been the one to crash into a tree, go rolling backwards, and take out 3 men with me. That's how that would have gone.
Well, yeah, duh. But I mean, just a lot of that stuff, and this is a wide open field. Throw in a wilderness or a Spotsylvania or a Chancellorsville with its trees. Good luck, right?
Tony said the fog too. Yeah, Lookout Mountain was actually fog that was getting in the way of the men too. That's why it's called the Battle Above the Clouds, is there was a lot of fog that day. But that was good for Hooker that he had that, because that meant that the Rebs couldn't see what was happening.
Well, they
keeping you awake. You give me shit all the time for.
Well, I mean, guys like Osterhaus snuck right up on him, right? Because they didn't see him coming, But when you talk about that, but this is before the single shell. This is the fact when you fired a musket and smoke lit up. So all you'd see the flash of your own musket, the flash of the musket and guns in front of you. That's what you were shooting at. You were shooting at flashes, not flashers, Mary. Flashes.
Ooh,
okay.
Undulations.
We're not talking about getting recklessly exposed on the Pickett's Charge battlefield here. We're talking about the musket, the fire, right? That's what you were shooting at, but you couldn't see. And you talk about the humidity and the fact there was no wind. That smoke just hung there. It just stayed.
It did. Yeah. And Snyder makes a good point too. Gunpowder smoke lingers and bonds to the moisture in the air. So if there's humidity, it just sticks around as well.
As I just said. That's literally what I just said. I don't get credit for it though. Okay. Anyway. That's a great point, Darren. Wow. I am smarter than I was 5 minutes ago. Thank you so much. Okay, whatever. Friggin' praise from friggin' Caesar. But anyway, but that is a big point though. That is a real serious point about that though. But he's right about the humidity, because it just how could you tell if for example, when they shut those guns down on Cemetery Hill, they stopped firing.
Yeah.
You don't know if they're gone or not. Okay, they must be out because you stopped firing. Send them.
Yeah, exactly.
And people don't realize too is when you see like the movie of the Gettysburg movie, you think they're all in the woods and they all come marching out. They're not. Kemper's guys are already 200 yards up on that first swale on the undulation, Mary. They're lying on their stomachs. They're halfway across the field when it starts. So they're lying all completely covered. They're not even in the trees.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about Pettigrew and Trimble, they're on the far left-hand side. They're still out there as well. So they're all exposed, but they can't be seen because of the smoke that's going on.
Yeah. Do you think that's one of the reason they did the huge artillery thing too, was to screen them with the smoke and not just try and take out?
No, I don't think. Well, maybe. I think it was just because they wanted to take out the guns. You always want to have artillery cover, but you always want to have artillery firing covering your infantry. But I think they realized they were marching upon 122 guns that were all dotted throughout that. So they wanted to take the guns out.
Yeah.
But they had that issue with the fuses. They were burning too long. They were overshooting, and they, between Hunt and Hancock, Hunt wanting to shut the guns down to save the guns for the artillery, whether it was by coincidence or not. They stopped and they got them to march, and they opened up the guns again. And that was on Hancock going on against Hunt, saying, "Why the hell did you stop firing the freaking guns?" But what I don't understand is, to be totally honest, is when the guns started at 1:07 p.m., as someone wrote the time down, when the Confederate guns started on Cemetery Hill, they were surprised. They must have seen them rolling the guns out, right? Because they're all gold, these guns. They're bronze. They were shiny. They weren't like the green ones you see today. It would have glittered. They must have seen the Confederates rolling the guns out. They must have known something was up. So, but they were surprised by it, The first shot, one of the first shots, killed one of Meade's assistants, took his head clean off.
Because didn't they overshot so much that they got to his headquarters, right?
Well, they were having lunch, having chicken stew, and seriously, and a shell literally took a guy's head right off.
Oh, that's
standing right near while they were having that lunch. So, but that's one of those things. But it is the smoke. That is true though. The smoke is a great equalizer, because I don't think that's a good point. I haven't really thought about that, but I don't think it was done to mask them. I think it was done specifically to take the guns out, because that was the game plan.
Yeah. I wonder if there was any times though that it was done specifically to mask what was happening.
Snyder, you could have credit for that. That's totally cool. She's gonna give you credit anyways. Doesn't matter.
See you later, Laurie. I didn't even realize Laurie was on.
Oh shit! Hey, Laurie. So we'll see Laurie at the round table. But we'll see her at the next line.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of people in here that come to the round table too, our St. Patrick's Day round table.
Oh, that's gonna be a mess.
Be fucking dangerous right there.
That's gonna be a mess. We'll have fun with that though. That'll be a good time. We have some fun stuff we'll talk about later about what we're going to do that night. But it's going to be a special night. It's not just going to be a regular old round table. We're going to have some fun that night. So we'll have a good time.
Ryan said that's all the staff do in the Civil War, according to the memoirs. Hang around to be maimed or killed horrifically and bloodily. That's what happens to one of Sherman's staff at Shiloh. He's out riding the lines in the morning, and all of a sudden,
well, look at Rosecrans guy.
Off his horse, like that. It's like, oh my god! But Sherman that's when he was taken by surprise. Yeah, because he'd been ignoring what those people, the guys from Ohio were saying. They're out there and they're not far, and Sherman's like, fuck that, they're not there.
Well, you read some of these diaries. They talk about I don't know if it's Wainwright's diary. I think it was Wainwright, the artillery guy. His diary, Charles Wainwright, talks about that lunch at Gettysburg where somebody stumbled upon a chicken. I don't know how the hell these things happen. Somebody, hey, I got a chicken here, right? They kill the chicken, they make soup out of it. And it's like they're all Hancock and me. They're all sitting around eating soup when the battle starts.
That's amazing. That's just that's hilarious.
I don't know where the hell you get. What I want to know is where you got the chicken. This is 3 days into this battle. There's 100,000 people there.
Is that like your neighbor's Hannibal Hamlin?
I haven't heard him in a while.
I thought you heard him a few weeks ago.
No. Oh. No, I haven't heard him since not since the fall.
I know you sent me that video of him one morning. Like,
my neighbor had a chicken. we call him Hannibal Hamlin just because it's stupid. That's why we call him Hannibal Hamlin. And he disappeared. So I think he's gone to the great chicken McNugget factory in the sky, I'm afraid. I think one of the local coyotes must have taken him out.
Poor Hannibal. See you, Ben. Okay. Thanks for stopping by.
Oh, see you, Frail. Take care.
Allie B, you don't just stumble upon chickens in your day-to-day life. Well, unless it's his neighbors.
I've only come across one chicken in my life, Allie. My neighbor knows the one we were just talking about. I mean, like roving chickens. I have turkeys in my neighborhood.
Yeah, we have turkeys around here too. I've seen the turkeys.
Got chased by a turkey one time.
See you later, Paul. Snyder said smoke was used in European warfare for centuries. It would mess up movements when flags were a major aspect of movements.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, like I said before, the fog of war, and you can't, you're making these decisions. And but it's interesting, though. It's just one of those things you hear, like you said before, it's like the weather with the soldiers. You hear a lot about it in the diaries, but you don't hear about
it
on the right, okay. You don't hear about it so much on these other things because people don't really talk about it when they talk about battles, talk about corps commands and movements. It's just they leave it out. I guess you can't talk about everything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think the weather
battle, so yeah.
The weather was definitely part of Lookout Mountain. They use that fog to screen them.
Yeah, and it's a big part of it. I mean, weather is a huge, we talk about this on every one of these podcasts. I think at one point we've talked about the weather. Weather is a huge part of all of these because every battle in some way, shape, or form, weather had something to do with. Not just the obvious ones like the Mud March, but the Shiloh thing we talked about. That thunderstorm was a huge part of this.
Yeah.
The heat at Gettysburg, they talk about, I don't know if it really affects it as much, but they talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Obviously
it happened in Meridian as well too. Like it talked
Meridian,
like the roads
Donaldson
were shitty.
Talked about. We're going to talk about this. The snow is a big part of Pea Ridge. We'll talk about, but obviously Fort Henry, it slowed down. It slowed down Grant's guys to the point they couldn't even make it. So it was all the guns and Porter and Foote. Taking care of all that. So it's a huge part of it. And again, and the other part about it was their understanding of the weather back then was different now. I mean, you didn't have your weather app. You didn't have your W2TF forecast app, right?
I'm not going to say what it said this morning. I'm not to screen cap that one and send it.
But they a lot of them thought that storms didn't travel. They just thought they just happened to pop up where you were. They didn't realize a storm started in Texas and went up to New England. They didn't just kind of form. And you didn't have Al Roker back then, Mary. Well, maybe you did.
Or those Alberta clippers that come through every so often through my area. Bringing it back to Meridian, I just thought of this. What was your big takeaway from it, or what did you learn? You're always asking me that question. I think on you first.
I think that the takeaway, it was something we talked about afterwards, and we talked a lot about William Suey Smith failing to take out the cavalry with Forrest, and how mad Sherman was, and the takeaway came out from that was, whether by hook or happenstance or whatever that phrase is, that benefited Sherman tremendously just by Smith occupying him. And so even though the plan was to take out Forrest completely, and even though he got pissed off or all those things about Smith afterwards, it ended up being successful because he kept Forrest away from him. So I wonder if the plan all along was, he really thinks Smith was going to really take him out, or he was just going to keep him busy. I think either way, it was a win.
Yeah,
because I think that people talk about how it was the whole precursor of March to the Sea and blah, blah, blah. The other thing that's interesting too is how much Sherman was in Polk's head. You know what I mean? Now, Polk was a disaster. I mean, you have to really stretch your eyes to really find something positive about Leonidas Polk. But I think that was an interesting part of it, that how he kept retreating. And I wonder if he saw a lot of that stuff throughout his life with Sherman, people retreating in front of him. That's how he flanked and bobbed and weaved. And I wonder if that was kind of the way he just thought it was.
Yeah.
Right. So when he did run into frontal assaults, if that was going to be something that he was going to have a tough time with, which he did. I don't know. But I think the Smith thing was the big thing. I think he screwed up, but I think he was successful because he provided that road bump, that bump in the road that kept Forrest away. Because if Forrest was all over him, like Armstrong was, I think that perhaps he would have, it might have been a tougher time for him.
No, I do. Yeah, I am starting to see now, after talking to you a little bit more about it, just the whole thing with like, what was the thing with Soy Smith going after Forrest? Was it just to keep him occupied, or did he want to really take him out? I think it's both.
I think he wanted to take him out, but he says, if
He
he
did.
can't take him out, if he can just get him away from me, I
Yeah,
would
just
there
to,
too.
even just if he keeps him away from me while I do this, you know. The other thing too that I took away from it was kind of just the, you know, the research that Sherman did into, you know, if this was a way to do warfare, to get away from Jomini, to get away from the Napoleonic style tactics, but also to read some letters that he wrote, where he wrote a letter to one of his daughters, and he said, you know, I don't want more men killed. I don't want to do a battle like Shiloh. And I think if I undertake what I want to, it's going to save lives. And he mentioned specifically, I've got friends fighting in this war, and they've also got sons as well fighting in this. And I don't want to be the reason for their death. So he's thinking at that point, how can I save lives? And that was something I'd never thought about, as much as I've studied the March to the Sea and now Meridian campaign, that that's what one thing he was considering. How can I do this? How can I save lives, but still how can we win the war? And he found a way to do it in this.
Yeah, he definitely was a forward-thinking guy. There's no question about that. And I think his reputation is also one that's a little bit harsh. I think Sherman, look, we have, no one has more fun with Sherman than we do with the fire, the pictures and shit. But I think the lives he saved far outgains the lives that he took. When you look at history in general, the Southerners don't want to hear that, but I think whether you like what he did or you don't like what he did, his tactic ultimately saved lives.
Yeah, and that's not something that, when, you know, he's getting bashed for apparently setting the whole state of Georgia on fire, or
Everywhere.
for whatever atrocities were committed on the march, which, yes, some of those are true. Some of his men went to
Columbia. I mean, certainly Atlanta, but again, even that's overrated, right?
Exactly.
I mean, as far as what he actually. But you know what though? But what was his ultimate goal though? Was psychological warfare against the public. And you know what? It's 150 years later, people still talk about it. So obviously he was successful.
Exactly. Bring an end to the war, but not at the cost of lives. And if you look at what Hardy and Beauregard end up doing with Savannah, abandoning it because they're like, no more battles, no more life lost. Like, what if they had done a battle at Savannah? How many more lives would have been lost? Like, they're coming off that, just off what they've heard about Franklin. And I think Franklin and what happened there factored into mostly Hardy's decision to say, no more. We can't do this anymore. I think it was a lot to do with Franklin and all the lives they lost there.
Oh, Franklin was such a waste of life, but it is interesting though. I mean, think about it. How many people in really history, even anybody, 150 plus years later, still have a reputation? Can I talk about you 150 years from now, Mary? They're gonna be
the Dairy
someone's gonna be doing
an
archaeological dig in Goderich. They're gonna find all these beer cans buried in your yard. They're like, wow, who the hell lived here? You know.
Fucker tattooed on me somewhere, and everybody's like, who's Fucker?
There was a story of this woman who used to throw rocks at kids from her front yard back in the early 2020s.
There is some truth to that legend.
Metal detect your yard. I'll be, pull tabs, like my yard, unfortunately.
Jim said it was absolutely brilliant of Sherman to go through the census records to find the most agriculturally productive counties that would support his march to Savannah. Yeah.
Oh, we talked about that.
Yeah, that was one thing we mentioned.
That he's right on about that, because that's you're gonna march and you live off the land. You gotta know where you're going. You gotta know where the supermarkets are. You gotta know where the deli is, Mary.
The grockery stores.
The grockery store. You know where every grockery store in Georgia was.
And once he was done with it, he apparently set fire to it.
He did. But it's. I mean, and I think a lot of that was learned in this Meridian campaign.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people. I mean, everyone here who watches this knows Meridian, but I think the average mainstream typical person, they're not going to teach the Meridian campaign in New England high schools, or even colleges. Maybe down there in Mississippi they probably do, but certainly here they don't.
No, well, it's not, like I said, like we said at the beginning of the episode, that it's one of those things that is almost like one of these parts of the war that's almost like a footnote, that it doesn't really get talked about a lot. But when you look at the bigger picture at the March to the Sea, it's his experiment, and he realizes this can work. And Grant is Grant with the March to Sea, he's a little apprehensive at first, but Sherman manages to convince him. I think probably because of like how much further he was going to have to go. And Grant was like, okay, yeah, I get it. You did it with Meridian, but can you do it that length of time? You
got to know, like Allie mentioned, you got to know where the goods are.
Yeah.
Like Allie, when the Bruins are going through Pennsylvania, you got to stop at Philly to grab a couple of wins, because that's where the wins are. Then you can move on and go lose in New York, but that's what you do. But that's what you got to do. But it's true though. You have to know where the ultimate goals of these things are if you're going to be living off the land, right? And that's the biggest takeaway. And the other thing too is how fast you have to move. Where they didn't Meridian, they didn't have
his
tents,
men were covering
right?
15 miles a day on average.
Well, you had to make.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you have to make sure that how do you guarantee these guys don't get bogged down? Don't let them bring tents. Have 2 wagons, right? That's all you have.
Yeah, and on the Mark actually mentions, I lived a time in Meridian during childhood, and they did talk about it there. So
I'm sure they do in certain parts, but you don't hear about it here.
No,
Massachusetts, you don't hear about the freaking Meridian campaign.
No, well, some of it too factors into the fact that the North won the war. Let's just talk about kind of the bigger events. Like I think you said yesterday when we were talking, sometimes it's almost like it's sometimes just Gettysburg or Antietam, Gettysburg, Appomattox. And these smaller battles like Stones River, like the Meridian campaigns, like they don't get mentioned as much,
No, I mean, again, because you can't, unless you're taking a course in the Civil War. I mean, this is getting deep into the weeds. You're talking Meridian. You're talking, I mean, even Stones River is into the weeds for the most part. But you can't focus on everything unless you're taking a really intense type of Civil War course, like a college level course. But it's good though. But it's good that people are interested though, because I think it's important. And you said this a million times, to understand the later battles, the important big battles later on. You got to know the ingredients to these battles.
Yeah,
right?
like Gettysburg just doesn't happen from July 1st to July 3rd. There's a whole bunch that happens before and after as well. And it's just like Chickamauga and getting Chattanooga doesn't just happen. There's a reason that they're able to hold Chattanooga and get there in the first place. And it goes all the way back to Stones River. It goes all the way back to that victory that Rosecrans had at Stones River. That's why, because had he not had that victory, they would have been having to fight for Nashville again, possibly. And it would have changed the entire game in the Western Theater.
Well, you go back to any of these. We talked before I think it was last summer or last fall, we were talking about Antietam, right?
Yeah.
Was Antietam doesn't happen if Second Manassas doesn't happen, right? So, the Union wins Second Manassas. Does Lee even go into Maryland? Probably not.
But what if South Mountain had been like, what if something different had happened at South Mountain?
Well, think about all these, exactly. And think of like, what happens if Milroy is able to hold on to Winchester, right? Does Gettysburg even happen, or does it happen at that time? That's the thing. That's what gets you. So you look at how all these things lead into each other, and how they all kind of dovetail into the bigger picture.
Exactly.
It's kind of like like whatever. It builds like a storm. It builds and builds and builds and builds, then it explodes.
Yeah.
But you can't get to that explosion without knowing how it builds into it.
But that's why the what if game is so good
to
look at. I know that's blasphemy.
You can't do the what if game. You can't mention Howard.
Oh, I know. But that's why the what if game.
Look what you did. Look what you did.
I know.
You could be involved in some fist fight on Facebook. Oh, Howard. I'm stupid.
But if you look at the what if game, I think it helps you have a better understanding of what actually happened and what could have happened and how that could have changed the game. And if you know how the game could have changed, you see the importance of the earlier days of the Civil War. Why Stones River should be looked at because of it could have been a game changer. Why Second Manassas needs to be looked at because it could have been
all big.
Exactly.
I mean, and you know what? It's what happens. What happens if Grant, who is sitting on the bang boat with Foote, right? At Donelson, and the Rebs escape. They ultimately probably get caught, but Grant, there's a national embarrassment because the Rebs got away because he was on the boat with Foote. Halleck's looking to get rid of him anyway, right?
Yeah.
So Grant, does Grant get fired? Is he because he was, Sherman had to talk him back into the Army anyway eventually.
Yeah,
Does he
exactly.
quit? Is that the end of Grant? So all these little things play into each other. And you can play the what if game. You could absolutely do that.
No, I think
all the time.
I think it's a good thing I think it's a great way to discuss history, to have a bit of fun with it, but to also help you understand these people more as well, and understand the battles and what happened.
Yeah, the North one spoiled. Well, non-accords are a friend of mine in South Carolina. He says they're just reloading. God,
Nicholas says even less discussed, at least up north, is Wilson's raid the following year. The contrast with Meridian is striking as Wilson, the boy general, dominates forest depleted troops as he rips through Alabama, ultimately destroying Selma and the University of Alabama. Good topic for a future podcast. I think we have talked about doing Wilson's raid as an episode, haven't we?
No one's touched the University of Alabama in a long time, especially in football. I know some Clemson friends who like that happen, No, but there's, I mean, Nicholas, all right. But that's a good point though. I mean, and Island number 10. Tony likes the island number 10. He's mentioned that a few different times.
He has, yeah. I think we do need to.
Well, when we do Vicksburg, we're going to talk about. When we do the Navy with Vicksburg, we'll talk about island number 10. But
good morning, Mike. He finally made it to one.
Oh, it's all right. But no, yeah, island number 10. Yeah, the bang boat. God, that's like the Jay-Z boat, I think.
Yeah. Snyder said the Civil War was taught to me in school as a greatest hits fashion rather than a discography.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we're doing with this podcast is not only trying to make these people like human, so they're not just dots on a map or whatever.
We're also bringing out the B-sides.
Exactly. Like, right? And why these things are important to study. Like, we did an episode about Ball's Bluff and just the ramifications it had. It's an important to look at too.
And I think all of us, to Snyder's point, is I was lucky to even get the greatest hits. I had, to be honest,
none in obviously, being educated.
Well, you're gonna pass because you're in a different freaking country though.
Yeah.
Here where I am, we talk about Lexington and Concord, the Revolutionary War. And next thing you know, it's World War I, and Lincoln's thrown in there. We don't get a lot of Civil War stuff. If we do, it's talk about Gettysburg and how, about that. We don't talk about. I'm sure to places like in the South where some of these folks are signing in from. Yeah, Meridian's going to be brought up in Mississippi. They're going to talk about Sherman in Savannah, in Atlanta. You don't talk about Sherman here. Sherman didn't come up once in my entire high school life. I knew who he was just by studying this stuff, but college it did a little bit, but not really. People.
Yeah, no, we didn't even touch it. Now it's funny when when some of my relatives went to high school, they learned about the Civil War, but it was very just from the stuff they've said to me, very much a lost cause slant. Because they will, or I know my mom, we were watching a documentary one time about Sherman, and she's like, that's the guy that burned everything. And I was like, oh, is it time for the come to Jesus? It was, we kind of had a come to Jesus Sherman chat about that one, which is like, he burned everything. I'm like, no.
No, basically here it's, the rebels fired on Fort Sumter. Abraham Lincoln and U.S. Grant rolled in, single-handedly Rambo style, beat them at Gettysburg. And then they somehow ended up in Appomattox and they quit. Yeah, that's the extent of how it is. And then it's moved on to Reconstruction and the Industrial Revolution and stuff like that. It goes from there and there. But that stuff needs to be taught more because that's the one thing Shelby Foote had right in his Ken Burns thing. Speaking of Ken Burns, is that all the stuff that happened in the Civil War is still effective today. It still is. And if people had studied more about it, people think the statue thing is a new phenomenon. We talk about this a million times.
Forever.
Since the first statues went up, the Confederacy, they've been controversial. This isn't new. Social media has ruined a lot of stuff because it's like, oh my God, this is. Can you believe what's going on? It's like it's been going on since 1900.
That's the question I get asked the most by people. Like my friends will say, like, okay, can you talk to me about the statue thing? And I'm like, okay, do you have 4 hours and a beer or 3? Because it's like when one of my friends asked me, can you tell me why the Civil War was fought? And I'm like, oh,
seriously,
we don't have time for this.
There is no time.
Yeah, there's no time for that. Yeah, there's no time for it.
But the movie, though, the Gettysburg, we jump at the Gettysburg movie.
Yeah,
that did a huge thing for the Civil War
nerd it did.
world that we're in, Mary, because that got people going. Especially, it made Joshua Chamberlain fall out of the sky and died for our sins type thing. But I mean, but it really helped spur reenacting. It really helped spur overall interest in the Civil War again.
Yeah.
And if people don't get into it and find a way to be fascinated by it and entertained by it, it's just going to fade away.
Well, yeah.
That's
And
why
what does it, you know, I know people say like there's like that Gettysburg industrial complex, but if you are a 10-year-old kid and you go to Gettysburg and that is what sparks you, good. Like,
and you'll appreciate
yeah,
it. And I know there was a, there was a going back to Facebook again.
yeah,
I was on Facebook again one day, Mary, and one of the sites,
that never ends
and
in
it was,
disaster.
no, well, there was a picture of some kid. There's that famous sniper nest picture at Devil's
Yeah.
Den, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone posted a picture of their like 10-year-old kid pretending he was dead where the sniper was, right?
Yeah.
You know where this is going, right?
Oh.
And so and of course some of the people got all bent out of shape about it.
Yeah.
And of course I jump in because I can't help myself. I'm like, well, what's the problem with this? I said, that kid, that's his connection. He's going to be interested in Gettysburg for that. Maybe now he's going to study more about it. He might be the next Gary Edelman, right?
Yep, exactly.
So he's not climbing on a cannon or climbing on it. Just don't be a dick about it.
No.
If that's what resonates with the kid, it makes him interested in Gettysburg. Maybe he's going to want to come back, and
Exactly.
maybe he's going to stumble into his own kids someday and bring his kids back.
Yeah.
So don't just because you don't like it, don't. It's okay to
Yeah, just,
scroll
you know what,
past stuff once
there
in a
is
while.
something called just scrolling past or hitting mute
Mhm.
and ignoring and just not worrying about it because it's not worth your time, and nobody should be put down for what they believe in history, for like, their opinions. Like we've always said, like any opinion is welcome here. Like we've got the message boards on our website, which I haven't had as much time over the last few weeks to be on there like I was before. I'm going to try and get on there today and post a few things. But yeah, if you guys haven't been to our website before, civilwarbreakfastclub.com, we do have a forum on there, and we got there's quite a few people who are active on there, which like I know Ryan's posted on there quite a few times, Jonathan has, and all that. Like, and
a lot of people aren't even on this comment on the message board.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of good discussion goes on over there, and it's very much you're not going to get put down for what your opinion is at all. Like we never wanted that with anybody that's on here, because we've seen it happening on the serious Facebook pages. You and I have both experienced it, Darren, with people doing the actually thing.
Some of the Bill Buckner stuff though, that's below the belt, but it's okay. No, but yeah. Speaking of getting yellow cards, Jacob, I got myself one. That's another story. I got to be careful when I post on stupid Facebook. They're out to get you.
I have taken my personal Facebook page is now just Civil War shit. That's it. I don't post anything else.
That's pretty much what it was before, though.
Oh yeah, but I was starting to see just so much negativity, and like people like just whatever, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Just gonna be the Civil War nerd on here.
No, well, it's a very heightened, environment right now with a lot of different things.
It is.
And so social media is the gasoline to opinions anyway, because you go on there, you can make the most outlandish claims and hold it, and it's all anonymous. Twitter is the worst at it.
Oh, it is. It totally is the worst for it. But the one thing that it's like, if somebody comes to Gettysburg and they've seen the Gettysburg movie and they're laughing and making jokes about Jeb Stuart, don't put them down for that. Try to teach them about what Jeb was
we've said
doing
before,
or whatever.
and people, there's the whole, Grant is good. Bragg is bad. Lincoln is good. I mean, here there, but like we said before, if you study any of these people really closely, you're going to find good and bad for everybody. And Jacob's finding that with Bragg, right?
Yep.
We've, you with McClellan, certainly.
Yep.
God knows you with Howard. Jeez,
I never really had an opinion on Howard before. I liked him, but then I started learning more.
What I'm saying is that the more you study, the more you're going to find out with these people that not everybody, the greatest aren't the greatest, the worst aren't the worst. It's always somewhere in between. And the more you study, the more you realize that. But a lot of these people on some of these pages, though, don't do that. They just go with that perception and they hold it.
Yeah,
right?
and
some people who we know who are real legit history people fall into this, especially with Howard.
Yeah, and that's really like when I see somebody really legitimate bash somebody, or when someone offers a counterpoint to what they're arguing or they believe, and they just end up getting shut down for it. it's like, I'm like, oh my God, just, it's okay to change your mind. Sherman was my favorite general for years. He's not anymore, and that's okay. And I've been bashed for that. Like I've been told like, you're a different person because you don't like Sherman anymore. It's like, I
Oh,
don't
could you
hate
remember
him.
when you made your big Sherman thing last summer? What about that? Got the
Holy,
everybody made that picture with the whole thing, and you could. I thought actually people were joking. I didn't realize. I'm like, oh my God, they're serious. They're
no.
ripping you, like personally ripping
They
you
they
because
did.
you say you like Howard.
I got a couple messages that were like, I'm disappointed you don't like Sherman anymore. And I'm like, the fuck? Like, fuck off. Seriously?
It's like for all it's none of their freaking business what the hell you like anyway.
Exactly.
You
Like,
know.
why don't you ask me what about Howard? You know, and I don't hate Sherman. Sherman was just here for a long time, and Howard has just been kind of like what happened with General Grant. I've created a new rank or I've created a rank for him. He's above
I
Sherman.
mean, I don't know if I have favorites and non-favorites. I hate everybody, Mary. You know me.
No, I
You
know.
know.
Mr. Negativity.
Oh, God, me? Okay.
No, I'm kidding. God.
How are
Trust
you?
me.
Fine. What's going on? Nothing.
Fuck.
Yeah, I'm the negative one. Okay.
Jesus, I'm just
Hmm.
now who's being serious?
Oh, who's all business now?
Yeah,
Okay.
Darren.
He's such a dick.
Yeah, Allie B, you're a different person. That's so dramatic. Oh, it was really. I'm like, really? Don't know how I
Yeah,
changed.
like you're a different person because you focus on whatever. That whole
I
thing
just
was
was
so
like, I
weird
was like,
anyway.
Sherman, I still respect him. He's still one of my favorite generals, but there's just so much about him already. There's so many books, and Howard is one of these ones that doesn't have the
Mhm.
voice. And I started reading about him more, and I thought, wow, like this guy needs more of a voice in history, and he's got a different
Mhm.
perspective. Like, Grant's memoirs are amazing, and so are Sherman's,
Right.
but Howard's are up there too for just if you want a different perspective on Columbia, read Howard's memoirs. Like
Yeah.
his
Well, speaking of
recounting of it's
books,
good.
Benjamin has a good question for you up your alley, Mary. What is there a best book to read about the Western Theater? What are you gonna go? Southern Storm, probably.
Southern Storm is very good for the March.
Mm-hmm.
There, Dave Powell's books. He's got a trilogy on
The
Chickamauga.
Chickamauga, yeah.
There's also some books in the Emerging Civil War series. There's one on Lookout Mountain, which is written by Dave Powell, and then there's one on Missionary Ridge and Ringgold Gap. And the good thing about the books from the
See
Emerging
what you did,
Civil,
Ben? See what you did, by the way?
yeah, the
See
good
what you
thing though, do I have those books? Oh, I do in my
did? Of
bookcase.
course you do.
Yeah, that no, I was just checking. I got a new bookcase thing I inherited from
I
my
got one of
aunt.
those coming in today, as a matter of fact.
Nice. But the good thing about the Emerging Civil War books is they are usually around 150 to 200 pages, but they often include driving tours of the battlefields,
Mhm.
which that's like an added bonus right there. But those are really good. So I don't know that there's one really definitive book that has been written about the Western theater. You have to I read as much as I can about it. Allie B will be able to make some recommendations too. Donald L. Miller's book about Vicksburg, which came out a couple years ago, is another excellent
Somebody
one.
got me that book.
Really? I
Yeah,
know.
I got a name on that one.
Someone's bought you a couple books.
Oh, that's right. You just see that. Oh, I forgot to. You did. I forgot to tweet those. Glad you remember that. Surprised you haven't. Never mind.
You've been busy.
No, I've been busy.
Yeah, that's why I didn't get
I've
on
been
you
busy.
about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's they're like, just read a variety of it. Kind of like James McPherson is said to be the book to start with for the overall Civil War, but then you kind of can start breaking it down from there. But yeah, definitely Vicksburg by Miller, Southern Storm by Trudeau, Powell's trilogy on Chickamauga. I know there's one that just came out recently. I think it's by Powell and Wittenberg about the Tullahoma campaign as well.
But read as much as you can, because every one of these authors is going to have a different spin. We've said before, the best books are the diaries, the soldier diaries.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. That's
Yeah,
my whole
yeah,
thing.
and also like the soldier diaries, but the memoirs of the generals, and actually their letters too. I've got a book that is just full of Sherman's letters, and it is so interesting to read.
Yeah.
The one of the most interesting ones is where he's super confident about the March to the Sea to Grant in his letters into Lincoln, because he has to be.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, he's writing his brother John, and he's saying, "Yeah, I don't know if I can, like, if I fuck this up, John, I'm done. And I could mess this up." He's questioning himself, which is interesting to see. You don't see that, you know, like what he's writing to Grant, because he's got to be confident and say, I can do this, I can make Georgia howl. Meanwhile, he's writing his brother like, yeah.
Well, it's just an interesting perspective, and you're always going to have to take the spin of the author in a lot of these cases. So that's why, and to be honest, the grunt guys who write the books,
like Michael Doherty, who Lisa
Dohertys,
Sammy has mentioned. Michael Doherty, right? It was Am I getting his name right? Michael Doherty, who was at Andersonville. That's the one that Lisa was inspired
that's
by.
what she said.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Edward Doherty, right?
The Canadian who found Booth.
16 of edges,
Yep.
But all these ones, what's a really good diary though? I mentioned this a little while ago, is that Charles Wainwright, the artillery one, and E.P. Alexander's Marys. That one was a good one.
Yeah.
Busting down those walls, But those ones are really, really good, especially the Wainwright one, because he talks, because he never intended that to be published. It was just his letters. He just wanted to write, to remember stuff, and it got published after he died.
Well, that's the thing. They didn't intend these letters to be published. And the great set of letters, which I managed to find one of McClellan's, the stuff he writes to his wife, some of the shit he says about Lincoln and his cabinet. Oh God.
We couldn't find the response. We try to find a lot of those. When we were talking about the
we wanted to get the back and forth on like what McClellan and Lincoln
was on
were
Antietam,
saying.
right?
Yeah,
we couldn't
find them.
Oh well.
And I looked all the way through that book too. Read and then question what you read letters, read like the primary sources. And I said, like, when I'm like reading Sherman's account of Columbia and then Howard's, it's a little bit of a different story going on there. Howard
Jim mentions Ransom's Anderson. That's a tough one. The Anderson Diary. That's a brutal one.
It is.
But it's got to be read though. You got to read it. You can't read it. You can't not read the stuff you don't want to read. You got to read it because that's why you got to read the stuff on the Confederate people and the stuff like that, because it all tells the big picture. You got to learn the whole 360.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a really good biography about a Confederate general, Simmons on Claiborne is one of the best. Yep,
it's another book you got my ass. As a matter of fact.
Yep. That's one of my favorites. It's a very balanced view of
I've read that one in a while. Actually, I've read the one yet.
You haven't? I didn't think you had.
No.
And actually, one of my favorite biographies is Fierce Patriot by Robert L. O'Connell about Sherman. It's hilarious. Every single page I laugh because he's so sarcastic when he writes.
Oh, definitely.
And he writes in such a way that, you really enjoy what you're reading about, and you really get to know Sherman really well too in that book. And some people criticize it because they're like, oh, it's not a very long biography. It's like, well, you don't need an 800-page biography on Sherman to know who he was.
That was great with this though. We can read these and talk about it, have fun with it, and just back in my work life, you know what I just read this. No, I don't care. That's what's great about this is we have a little audience with this.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, it's like, because people sometimes will ask me, what have you been reading? Well,
I just finished reading the book on so and so and so and so. But like, why the hell didn't you graduate a billion years? Why do you read this shit? I'm like, well, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, no, I love reading about it. Like I said, I was up at 6 a.m. and reading Howard's memoirs this morning. That's what sometimes you get up and something's calling you to read it, and that's what I did. So. Yep,
definitely. But
very, very good.
Oh, I'm gonna shut this down, Mary. It's almost 12:20.
Yep.
Time flies, huh?
Mm-hmm. This was a great time this morning too.
It was.
Everybody hopping on here.
Definitely a good one.
No, it's really, really good.
So what do we got coming up? So we got Pea Ridge that we're doing on Tuesday. Yeah.
And then we have the Bentonville. That's on the 13th. And then on the 17th, we will be having our roundtable, St. Patrick's Day roundtable. So I know a lot of people have been to our roundtable before. So as usual, I'll send out the invite. But if you've never been before, send us an email, info@civilwarbreakfastclub.com, and I will get that email or the invite to you probably a few days before.
For those who've been on, it's just a hang. For those who haven't, it's just like this, except everybody's on, and we can just all talk to each other.
Yep.
We're gonna have some fun on this next one. It's St. Patty's Day. Everybody's stuck in their house for the most part, so we'll have our own little St. Patty's Day Civil War little party for a couple hours. We'll definitely.
I will wear my shirt that I just got.
Oh, look at you, huh?
Yep.
Oh,
New York.
Okay.
Yep.
Very
88th
nice.
New York Volunteer Infantry.
Meager?
Yep. Meager.
Is that what it is?
Mrs. Meager's own. Mrs. Mars.
Oh God! But we'll have a little fun with that. We'll definitely stay on long. That'll be a fun night. We're gonna keep Ryan up late.
Yeah, and it's also very casual. So if anybody's got to leave at a certain point, like you just leave the Zoom meeting. We're not going to be like, we understand people have lives outside of this too. Yeah, Benjamin. Oh, thank you. Well, we're glad to have you here too. Well, thank you.
Hopefully people, we have a lot of fun with this. Hopefully people listen to the podcast too. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah. The podcast usually, like, I dropped it last night at like 7:30 because I was done editing early because it was it was one of our shorter ones. It was 45 minutes long. But it's out there wherever you get podcasts. So Podbean, iTunes, it's on Audible podcasts too, on Amazon. So yeah, it's out. Definitely listen to it. Ryan, if you need to leave, just keel over and off.
Yeah, it's problem solved. Pee bucket, but basically, yeah. So check out the podcast. But we do, like we said, we do this every Saturday morning. But the podcast is a lot of fun, and I get a feeling this next one's going to be a really good one because we got some ideas churning in the dark recesses of our, hop and barley dried out brains. Some ideas that we're going to do for this next one. So we'll have a good time. So St. Patty's Day will be a good time because you know what? Chances are you're not going anywhere. It's a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Might as well come hang with us and drink some libations, have some fun with us. You're all
Mark said this is more fun than the dry Civil War discussions I'm used to. Well, we're glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, we just it's kind of a down to earth.
Yeah. Well, we've said this many times. Is there's only so many places you can go in real life to talk about this stuff, and the ones that are online tend to be a little more bookish.
Yeah.
And we've found that, and we've said this a million times, some of the best Civil War discussions I've ever had have been sitting in bars in places like Gettysburg, just shooting the shit, hanging out, talking stories, and it's fun. So that's what this kind of was the genesis of this entire thing. So that's kind of what we've been doing this. So that's kind of how we roll with it. So hopefully, Mark, definitely jump on the round table on St. Patty's Day. I'm sure you'll have a good time with it. And we'll have some fun and games with that. And then we'll be doing this again. And then this long-awaited book club, Mary's finally coming up.
I know.
Well, we could have written a book in the time we first started talking about this. So we'll be talking about Eric Schleinlein's Black Iron Mercy, which is at the end of March. We're going to be doing a round table to talk specifically about the book. And we'll have some surprises for that as well. We'll have some fun with that. So, so I think that's a good place to drop off for now as we get ready to go off into our real world again. Yeah. And go off into the great
and be sure to go to our website too, because I updated the coming attractions. So on there you'll see what we've got. Like you'll see we've got Pea Ridge next week, and then Bentonville, our round table, and then we will be doing the first battle of Kernstown.
I am looking forward to Kernstown.
I am too, actually.
That'll be a good time.
We'll have fun with Stonewall Jackson.
Oh, we definitely will. So we'll have a lot of fun with that. So you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Have a safe and lovely weekend. Yeah. And we will, it's rainy here, so I don't want to do it today. So, but we'll find something to do. Yeah. But anyway, have a safe weekend. We will look forward to talking to you all. Thanks for jumping on. Check out the podcast if you haven't already. And we will look forward to talking about EVD, Earl Van Dorn, in the Pea Ridge. So we'll have a lot of fun.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will see you back here next Saturday.
We'll see you later. Go Bruins, Biddles.
Yeah, go Bruins. That's my team now.
All right. See you guys later.
Bye.
All right. Take care.